The security alert flashed red at 11:47 p.m. Someone was stealing corporate secrets, right now, in real time, from the CEO's personal computer. Daniel Brooks had exactly 13 minutes to stop a digital heist that could destroy careers, topple a billion-dollar company, and expose classified information to the world. But when he burst into the corner office on the 42nd floor, gun drawn and badge ready, he found something far more dangerous than any hacker. Victoria Hale herself, sitting calmly behind her desk, watching him with eyes that held secrets even deeper than the ones hidden in her encrypted files. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the world. The fluorescent lights in the server room cast everything in shades of blue and white, making the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower feel less like a workplace and more like the belly of some vast, breathing machine. Daniel Brooks sat alone among the humming servers, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the practiced rhythm of someone who'd spent years learning to speak the language of ones and zeros. At 34, Daniel had the kind of face people forgot easily: medium height, dark hair kept short and professional, features that blended into crowds. He preferred it that way. Invisibility was an asset in his line of work. As a freelance cybersecurity contractor, he'd built his reputation on being thorough, discreet, and forgettable. Companies hired him to find their weaknesses, patch their vulnerabilities, and disappear before anyone remembered his name. Tonight was supposed to be simple: a routine security audit for Hale Industries, a mid-sized tech firm specializing in proprietary encryption software. 3 weeks of diagnostics, a final report, and then back home to his daughter Emma, who was currently spending the week with his late wife's sister in Milwaukee. Daniel glanced at his watch. 11:34 p.m. He'd promised himself he'd leave by midnight. Tomorrow was Saturday, and he'd planned to drive up early to surprise Emma at her aunt's place. Maybe take her to that aquarium she'd been talking about for months. But then the monitor flickered. It was subtle, barely a hiccup in the continuous stream of network traffic scrolling across his screen. Most people wouldn't have noticed it at all. But Daniel Brooks had spent the better part of a decade learning to see the invisible, to notice the microscopic anomalies that signaled something wrong in the digital landscape. He leaned forward, fingers already flying across the keyboard as he isolated the traffic pattern. His eyes narrowed behind his glasses as the data began to resolve into something recognizable. Someone was executing a packet-sniffing operation, right now, from inside the building. Daniel's pulse quickened as he traced the data flow. Packet sniffing wasn't illegal by itself. It was a standard diagnostic tool. But this particular instance was targeting a very specific source: the private network drive of Victoria Hale, CEO and founder of the company. And whoever was doing it had covered their tracks well. Too well. Daniel pulled up the authentication logs, his mind racing through possibilities. Internal threat? Disgruntled employee? Industrial espionage? The command structure of the attack was sophisticated, using legitimate company credentials to mask the intrusion. It would have been invisible to standard security protocols. Would have been. But Daniel Brooks didn't rely on standard protocols. His fingers moved faster now, opening multiple terminal windows as he peeled back layers of the attack. The credentials belonged to someone with high-level access, someone in the executive tier. He cross-referenced the authentication signature against the company directory, and his blood went cold. Marcus Delgado, Operations Director. Daniel sat back in his chair, processing the implications. He'd met Delgado twice during his security audit, a smooth-talking executive in his late 40s with an expensive suit and a handshake that felt like a business transaction. The kind of man who measured every interaction in terms of what it could do for him. The kind of man who might have reasons to spy on his own CEO. Daniel's mind flashed to the company gossip he'd overheard in the break room last week. Something about a major restructuring announcement coming soon. Something about certain departments being eliminated. Something about Marcus Delgado's division being on the chopping block. Daniel pulled up a secondary monitor and began documenting everything: timestamps, data packet sizes, destination addresses. If this went where he thought it was going, evidence would be crucial. Then he saw the transfer volume. Whoever was running this operation had already copied nearly 3 gigabytes of data from Victoria Hale's private drive. Personnel files, financial projections, strategic planning documents, board meeting preparations. Everything someone would need to sabotage a CEO before a major announcement. Daniel checked his watch again. 11:39 p.m. He reached for his phone, then hesitated. Who exactly was he supposed to call? The CEO, whose computer was being actively compromised? Building security? Who might be in on it? The police, who'd want evidence he didn't have time to properly compile? No. This required direct action. Daniel made a decision that would change everything. He pushed back from his desk, grabbed his access badge, and headed for the elevator. His worn canvas messenger bag hung across his shoulder. He never went anywhere in this building without his tools. The hallways were nearly empty at this hour, just the occasional night janitor pushing a cart or late working associate hurrying toward the exit. The elevator climbed smoothly, numbers ticking upward. 38, 39, 40. Daniel's reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors, a quiet man in jeans and a button-down shirt, perpetually out of place in a world of power suits and corner offices. Emma's face flashed through his mind. Her bright eyes. Her laugh. The way she'd hugged him goodbye last weekend, making him promise to be safe. Always, sweetheart, he'd told her. Daddy's always safe. The elevator chimed. 42nd floor, executive suite. The doors opened onto a different world. Here, the industrial blue-white of the server room gave way to warm lighting, mahogany paneling, and carpet so thick it absorbed sound. Original artwork hung on the walls, abstract pieces that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. Everything screamed money, power, and control. Victoria Hale's corner office sat at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar, warm light spilling out into the corridor. Daniel moved quietly, years of careful observation making him naturally silent. As he approached, he could hear the soft click of keyboard keys, the occasional rustle of papers being shuffled. He reached the doorway and stopped. The office was massive, at least twice the size of his entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Chicago's nighttime skyline, the city spreading out below in a glittering grid of light and shadow. Modern furniture mixed with antique pieces, creating a space that felt both cutting-edge and timeless. And behind an enormous glass desk sat Victoria Hale. Daniel had seen her before, of course. She'd given the welcome speech at his orientation 3 weeks ago, a polished presentation about company values and security culture. But he'd been at the back of the conference room then, just another contractor in a sea of faces. Up close, she was different. Victoria Hale was 42, according to her company bio, though she could have passed for younger. Dark hair pulled back in a simple twist, sharp features that suggested both intelligence and determination. She wore a charcoal suit jacket over a cream blouse, her posture perfect even after what must have been a 12-hour workday. She was focused intently on her laptop screen, one hand moving her mouse while the other made occasional notes on a legal pad. The classic image of a CEO burning midnight oil before a crucial presentation. She hadn't noticed him yet. Daniel cleared his throat softly. Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and wariness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He could see her mind working, trying to place his face, categorize the potential threat of a strange man appearing in her office doorway at midnight. Then recognition flickered across her features. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice controlled and professional. "The security contractor. I didn't expect anyone else to be working this late." "I need you to step away from the computer," Daniel said quietly. The words came out more blunt than he'd intended, but there wasn't time for subtlety. Every second that machine stayed connected to the network was another second of potential data loss. Victoria's expression shifted from surprise to something harder. Her fingers moved almost imperceptibly toward the phone on her desk. "Excuse me?" "Please," Daniel said, taking a single step into the office, but keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you, but I need you to step away from that computer right now." Victoria stood, her chair rolling back silently on the plush carpet. She was tall, 5'9", maybe 5'10", and the way she held herself suggested someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. "Mr. Brooks, I don't know what you think you're doing, but your computer is being hacked," Daniel interrupted. "Right now, someone is copying files from your private drive using credentials that identify them as Marcus Delgado." The name landed like a physical blow. Victoria's professional mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing something raw underneath. Shock. anger, and something else, something that looked like fear. She glanced at her laptop screen, then back at Daniel. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "Our security systems would have flagged any unauthorized access." "They should have," Daniel agreed, "but whoever set this up knew exactly how to bypass standard protocols. They've been pulling data for at least 20 minutes, maybe longer." Victoria moved around her desk, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor beneath the carpet's edge. She was studying him now, reassessing, trying to decide if he was telling the truth or if this was some elaborate con. "Show me," she said finally. Daniel moved to her laptop, careful to keep his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled up a terminal window and began entering commands, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, network traffic logs, authentication timestamps, data transfer volumes. Victoria leaned in, close enough that Daniel caught the faint scent of expensive perfume mixed with coffee and the particular smell of stress that came from too many hours without a break. "I don't understand what I'm looking at," she admitted. "This," Daniel said, highlighting a section of code, "is a packet sniffer. It's been routing copies of your files to an external server. And this," he pulled up another window, "is the authentication signature. Marcus Delgado's credentials, accessed from his office terminal at 11:17 p.m. tonight." Victoria went very still. "Marcus is in New York," she said quietly. "He flew out this morning for meetings." "Then someone is using his computer," Daniel replied, "or his login information. Either way," he stopped. The screen had changed. A new alert flashed in the corner, a security protocol activation. "What is that?" Victoria asked. Daniel felt his stomach drop as he read the message. "That," he said slowly, "is a problem." By shutting down the outbound data stream to stop the hack, he'd triggered the company's automated security response system. It was designed to protect against data theft by immediately isolating compromised terminals and encrypting their contents, which meant Victoria's computer had just locked them out completely. Daniel pulled up the security protocol details, his mind racing through the implications. "Can you unlock it?" Victoria asked. "Eventually, but the system is designed to be thorough. It's implementing a full encryption cascade on your drive. Everything, files, applications, operating system. Complete lockdown." "How long?" Daniel checked the protocol timer. "The encryption process will complete at midnight. After that, we have a 12-hour window to rebuild the security keys before the automated defense program considers the terminal compromised beyond recovery." Victoria stared at him. "And then what happens?" "Then the system executes a complete data wipe. Everything on this machine disappears. Permanently." The color drained from Victoria's face. She sank into her desk chair, her professional composure finally cracking. "Tomorrow morning," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I have a board presentation at 9 a.m. Everything I need is on this computer: financial models, restructuring proposals. 3 months of work." Daniel watched her process the reality of the situation. He could see the calculations running behind her eyes, the domino effect of missing that presentation, the questions it would raise, the ammunition it would give her enemies, people like Marcus Delgado. "Can you fix it?" she asked, looking up at him. "Yes," Daniel said. "But not quickly. The encryption is military grade. I'll need to rebuild the security keys from scratch, and that means manually reconstructing the authentication framework. It's going to take hours." Victoria checked her watch. It was 11:47 p.m. "Then you'd better get started," she said. Daniel nodded, already pulling his laptop from his messenger bag. But as he began setting up his workstation on the far side of Victoria's desk, he realized something that made him pause. "I had plans tonight," he said quietly. Victoria looked up from where she'd begun gathering papers from around her office. "Plans?" "A date," Daniel said. It wasn't exactly true. He'd planned to grab takeout and video chat with Emma before she went to sleep. But something about the lie felt necessary, a small assertion of a life beyond this crisis. Victoria studied him for a moment, and something that might have been amusement flickered across her tired features. "A date," she repeated. "Let me guess. You called and canceled?" "Not yet." "Are you going to?" Daniel pulled up the first layer of encryption code on his screen. His phone sat in his pocket, silent. He thought about Emma's disappointed face if he missed their call. Thought about the CEO sitting across from him, whose entire career might depend on the next few hours. Thought about the kind of man who'd choose to steal rather than compete fairly. Yeah, he said finally. I'm going to cancel. Victoria reached into a drawer and pulled out her own phone. She tapped the screen a few times, then set it on the desk. I just ordered dinner from the place downstairs. They're closed, but the owner owes me a favor. It'll be here in 30 minutes. She paused, then added with the ghost of a smile, Consider it payment for missing your date. Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time. Not the CEO of a major corporation, not the powerful executive whose office could fit his entire apartment twice over, but a woman who'd spent her evening preparing for a presentation that might determine her professional future, only to have someone try to sabotage her in the cruelest possible way. Tell me something, Victoria said, settling into the chair across from him. This date you're missing, is she prettier than I am? It was a strange question, testing, playful, but with an edge of genuine vulnerability underneath. Daniel suspected it had been a long time since Victoria Hale had asked anyone a question without already knowing the answer. He didn't smile, didn't deflect. Instead, he looked directly at her and said the words that changed the entire night. Your computer is being hacked. Everything else can wait. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. A kind of recognition, perhaps, or respect. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then let's catch whoever did this. The office settled into an unusual rhythm. Daniel worked at his laptop, lines of code scrolling across his screen as he methodically deconstructed and rebuilt the encryption framework layer by layer. Victoria sat on the leather couch near the windows, her laptop balanced on her knees as she attempted to recreate her presentation from memory and backup files. The promised dinner arrived at 12:30 a.m., Italian from a place called Angelo's that apparently knew exactly what Victoria Hale liked. Chicken marsala, fresh bread, a Caesar salad that looked better than anything Daniel had eaten in months. They ate in companionable silence, Victoria occasionally asking questions about the hack, while Daniel explained in terms that stripped away the technical jargon. So Marcus, or whoever used his credentials, they got 3 gigabytes of data? She asked, picking at her salad. Roughly. Maybe more before I shut it down. What was he after? Based on the file access patterns? Everything. Your calendar, your emails, board preparation documents, personnel files. Victoria set down her fork. He wanted ammunition, she said quietly. For tomorrow's meeting, Daniel looked up from his screen. The restructuring? Victoria nodded. I'm proposing we sunset his entire division. The operations department has become redundant. Most of their functions can be automated or absorbed by other teams. It's a matter of efficiency, not performance. But Marcus? She trailed off, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Marcus has been with the company for 8 years. He helped us through some difficult times, and now I'm about to tell him his department doesn't have a future. So he decided to strike first, Daniel said. Apparently. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in the room. Daniel had seen it before. The particular kind of pain that came from being undermined by someone you'd trusted. It was never just about the professional damage. It was personal. Can I ask you something? Victoria said after a moment. Sure. Why did you come up here? You could have just shut down the intrusion remotely, sent me an email, covered yourself without getting directly involved. Daniel considered the question. It was a fair one. The smart play, the safe play, would have been exactly what she described. Document everything, report through proper channels, maintain professional distance. I'm a father, he said finally. I have a 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Victoria waited, sensing there was more. Her mother, my wife, died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast. One day we were planning Emma's 5th birthday party, and 6 months later I was a single parent trying to figure out how to braid hair and help with homework and explain why mommy wasn't coming home. He paused, surprised at himself for sharing this. He never talked about Sarah. Not with anyone except Emma. I'm sorry, Victoria said softly. Daniel shook his head. My point is, I learned something from watching Sarah fight. She was a lawyer, a good one. Specialized in employment law, defending people who'd been wronged by their employers. And she taught me that sometimes the right thing to do isn't the safe thing. Sometimes you have to stand up when you see something wrong happening, even if it's easier to look away. He met Victoria's eyes. Someone was stealing from you, trying to destroy your work. I couldn't just send an email about that. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight it hadn't before. Your wife sounds like she was an extraordinary person. She was. Emma is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only reason I keep going sometimes. They fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Less awkward, more comfortable. Daniel returned to his code, his fingers moving across the keyboard with renewed focus. The encryption framework was complex, military-grade security with multiple redundancy layers. Each key had to be rebuilt precisely, tested, verified. One mistake and the entire system would reject the reconstruction. It was 2:47 a.m. when he finally completed the first major layer. He looked up and realized Victoria had fallen asleep on the couch, her laptop still balanced precariously on her knees, her head tilted at an angle that would definitely cause neck pain when she woke up. Daniel stood quietly and moved across the office. He carefully lifted the laptop and set it on the coffee table, then grabbed the throw blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over her shoulders. Victoria stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Daniel returned to his work. Around 4:15 a.m., his phone buzzed, a text from Emma's aunt. She woke up crying, missing you. I got her back to sleep, but wanted you to know. Daniel stared at the message, guilt settling heavy in his chest. He should be there, should be the one comforting his daughter when she had nightmares. Instead, he was in a corner office helping a CEO he barely knew recover from corporate sabotage. He started to type a response, then heard movement behind him. Victoria was awake, rubbing her neck with a grimace. What time is it? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. 4:15. How's it going? I'm through the first encryption layer, 2 more to go. Victoria stood, folding the blanket. She noticed it for the first time and glanced at Daniel with something like surprise. Thank you, she said. You looked uncomfortable. She moved to her desk and pulled out a bottle of scotch from the bottom drawer along with 2 glasses. I don't usually drink when I work, she said, pouring 2 fingers into each glass, but I figure tonight qualifies as unusual circumstances. She handed one to Daniel. 2 unusual circumstances, he said, raising his glass. To people who show up when it matters, Victoria countered. They drank. The scotch was expensive, smooth and warm, and nothing like the cheap whiskey Daniel occasionally bought for himself. It spread through him like liquid comfort, loosening muscles he hadn't realized were tight. Can I ask you something now? Daniel said. Fair's fair. That question earlier, about whether my date was prettier than you. What was that about? Victoria smiled, and for the first time that night it reached her eyes. Honestly, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. Everyone in my world wants something, a promotion, a contract, influence, money. You showed up in my office at midnight to tell me my computer was being hacked, and the first thing you mentioned was that you had somewhere else to be. It was refreshing. I still canceled my date to help you. But you didn't want to. That's the difference. You made a choice. Daniel considered this. For what it's worth, he said, she's 7 years old, loves marine biology, and thinks I'm the smartest person in the world. So yeah, she's definitely prettier than you. Victoria laughed, a real laugh, not the polished chuckle of corporate meetings. Your daughter. My daughter. The answer I deserved for asking such a ridiculous question. They worked through the rest of the night. Daniel on the encryption, Victoria rebuilding her presentation. Occasionally one would ask the other a question or share a thought, and the conversation would flow for a few minutes before they returned to their respective tasks. Daniel learned that Victoria had started the company 12 years ago in a tiny office with 3 employees and a dream of creating unbreakable encryption. That she'd fought her way through a male-dominated industry with nothing but intelligence, determination, and a refusal to be dismissed. That she'd been married once, briefly, to a man who'd wanted a wife who stayed home and hosted dinner parties, not a CEO who worked 80-hour weeks. Victoria learned that Daniel had been working in cybersecurity since he was 19, that he'd taught himself to code by hacking his high school's grading system to fix a mistake that had cost his best friend a scholarship, that he'd met Sarah in college, that they'd had Emma after 7 years of trying, that he'd walked away from a lucrative corporate position after Sarah died because he couldn't stomach the politics and the pretense anymore. By 6:30 a.m., Daniel had rebuilt the second encryption layer and was deep into the third. The sun was starting to rise, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. Victoria stood by the windows, her presentation finally complete, watching the city wake up below. "It's going to work, isn't it?" she said. "The encryption? Yes. I should be done within the hour." "I meant tomorrow, today. The board meeting." Daniel saved his progress and stood, stretching muscles that had been locked in one position for too long. "You've got a solid proposal," he said. "The financials support it. The market research backs it up. And unless Marcus has something we don't know about, he just destroyed his own credibility by stealing confidential data. He'll deny it, say his credentials were compromised." "They were, by him." Victoria turned from the window. "How can you be so sure?" Daniel pulled up a secondary file on his laptop, something he'd been compiling throughout the night while the encryption rebuilt itself. "Because I documented everything, the intrusion path, the data packets, the timestamps, the access logs. I even traced the external server where he was routing the stolen files." He looked at Victoria. "Marcus didn't just hack your computer. He left a trail that leads directly back to him." Victoria moved closer, studying the evidence on Daniel's screen. "This is admissible?" "I'm not a lawyer, but it's thorough, time-stamped, independently verified against multiple systems. If Marcus tries to claim he's innocent, this puts him in his office, at his computer, executing a sophisticated data theft at the exact time he says he was in New York. He could have done it remotely. He could have, but the authentication logs show a physical login from his terminal. Someone was sitting at his desk, using his credentials, stealing corporate secrets. Either it was him, or he allowed someone else to use his access, which is itself a serious security violation." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "You said you prefer staying invisible," she said finally. "But you're about to blow up an executive's career. That's not exactly keeping a low profile." Daniel shrugged. "He made the choice when he decided to steal from you. I'm just making sure there are consequences." The encryption framework completed at 7:42 a.m., Daniel ran a full diagnostic, checking every layer, every key, every authentication point. The system was solid, stronger actually than it had been before the attack. "Done," he said. Victoria's computer unlocked with a soft chime, her files restored and accessible. She sat at her desk and opened her presentation, scrolling through the slides to verify everything was intact. "It's all here," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Everything." Daniel began packing up his equipment, laptop, cables, the various tools he'd used throughout the night. His messenger bag was almost full when Victoria spoke again. "What happens now?" "Now I go home, shower, drive to Milwaukee to see my daughter. I meant with this." She gestured at her computer. "With Marcus, with the evidence." Daniel zipped his bag closed. "That's up to you. You're the CEO. But if it were me, I'd walk into that board meeting prepared to defend your proposal on its merits. And if Marcus makes his move, if he tries to use whatever he stole to undermine you, then you show them exactly what kind of man he is." He paused at the door. "One more thing. The files he copied? I corrupted them during the shutdown. Whatever he has on that external server, it's garbage. Useless fragments of code that won't open properly. He's got nothing." Victoria stood and crossed the office to where Daniel waited. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for showing up, for staying, for—" She trailed off, searching for words. "For caring enough to help someone you barely know." "You're welcome." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "My personal cell number is on the back. If you ever need anything, a reference, a job, someone to talk to at 3 in the morning, call me." Daniel took the card. "I'm serious about the 3 a.m. thing," Victoria added. "I'm apparently always awake anyway." He smiled. "Good luck in there today?" "I don't need luck," Victoria said. "I have evidence." Daniel left her there in her corner office, the morning sun streaming through the windows, the city of Chicago spreading out below like a promise of everything that was possible when people chose to fight for what was right. He rode the elevator down to the 42nd floor, the server room that had been his workspace for the past 3 weeks. His contract was officially over. The security audit was complete. It was time to pack up and disappear, the way he always did. But as he gathered his things, the photos of Emma he kept taped to his monitor, the coffee mug she'd made him in art class, the worn notebook where he tracked every system vulnerability he found, Daniel realized something had changed. He didn't feel invisible anymore. His phone buzzed. Another text from Emma's aunt. "She's asking when you're coming. I told her this morning. Don't make me a liar." Daniel smiled and typed back, "On my way. Tell her to pick where we're having breakfast." He took one last look at the server room, the blinking lights, the humming machines, the cold mechanical rhythm that had been his sanctuary for so long. Then he picked up his bag and headed for the door. The highway stretched north through the gray morning, Chicago's skyline shrinking in Daniel's rearview mirror until it was just a distant cluster of glass and steel against the horizon. He'd stopped at a gas station outside the city to grab coffee and wash his face in the bathroom, trying to scrub away the exhaustion that clung to him like smoke. His reflection in the cracked mirror had shown a man who'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, but his eyes were clear, alert. He had 3 hours of driving ahead before he'd see Emma, and the thought of her smile was enough to keep him going. The radio played softly, some morning show discussing traffic patterns and weather forecasts. Daniel barely heard it. His mind kept returning to the corner office, to Victoria standing by the windows watching the sunrise, to the way she'd handed him her business card like it was something precious. His phone rang at 9:03 a.m. Daniel glanced at the screen, unknown number with a Chicago area code. He almost didn't answer. Then curiosity got the better of him. "This is Daniel." "Mr. Brooks." The voice was smooth, professional, male. "This is Richard Chen, Chief Legal Counsel for Hale Industries. Do you have a moment?" Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Legal counsel calling him directly was never a good sign. "I'm driving," he said carefully, "but I'm listening. I'll be brief. There's been an incident this morning involving our board meeting. We need you to return to the office immediately." "What kind of incident?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Daniel could hear voices in the background, urgent and overlapping. "The kind that requires your expertise and your testimony. How soon can you be back in the city?" Daniel looked at the highway signs flashing past. He was already 40 miles north of Chicago. "I have somewhere I need to be," he said. "Mr. Brooks, I understand you have personal commitments, but this is a matter of corporate security and potential criminal activity. We need you here, now." Daniel thought about Emma waiting for him, thought about the promise he'd made to her aunt, thought about the way his daughter's face would fall when he had to explain why he wasn't coming after all. Then he thought about Victoria, walking into that boardroom alone. 2 hours, he said. "I can be there in 2 hours." "Make it 90 minutes if you can." The line went dead. Daniel pulled off at the next exit and found a quiet spot in a parking lot. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, before pulling up his contacts and calling Emma's aunt. She answered on the third ring. "Please tell me you're almost here." "I'm not," Daniel said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "Something came up with work. An emergency. I have to go back to Chicago." "Daniel, she's been talking about this all morning. She's already wearing her coat." I know. Can I talk to her?" There was shuffling on the other end, then Emma's voice, bright and excited. "Daddy, are you here? Aunt Linda says we're going to see the dolphins." Daniel closed his eyes. "Hey, sweetheart. Listen, I have some bad news. I can't come today. Something important came up at work, and I have to help some people." The silence on the other end was worse than crying would have been. "But you promised," Emma said finally, her voice very small. "I know I did, and I'm so sorry, but I promise I'll make it up to you. This weekend, okay? Just you and me. We'll do the aquarium and anything else you want." "You always say that." The words hit him like a punch to the chest because they were true. How many times in the past 3 years had he made promises he couldn't keep? How many times had work or life or simple exhaustion gotten in the way? "Emma, I have to go," she said, and the line went dead. Daniel sat in the parking lot for 5 more minutes, staring at his phone. Then he turned the car around and headed south, back toward the city, back toward whatever crisis was waiting for him at Hale Industries. He made it in 75 minutes. The Meridian Tower looked different in daylight. The glass facade reflected the morning sun, making the building seem almost aglow. Daniel parked in the visitor lot and took the elevator to the executive floor, his messenger bag slung over his shoulder, his body running on caffeine and adrenaline. Richard Chen met him at the elevator doors. He was a thin man in his 50s with silver-rimmed glasses and the kind of precisely tailored suit that screamed expensive lawyer. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming back." "What happened?" Chen's expression was grim. The board meeting started at 9. Ms. Hale presented her restructuring proposal. Marcus Delgado attempted to undermine her with allegedly confidential documents. Things got complicated from there. They walked quickly down the hallway toward the main conference room. Daniel could hear raised voices through the closed doors. "Define complicated," Daniel said. "Mr. Delgado is claiming the documents he obtained prove Ms. Hale has been engaging in preferential treatment and unethical business practices. Ms. Hale is claiming Mr. Delgado stole confidential data through illegal hacking. The board is demanding proof from both sides." Chen stopped outside the conference room doors. "You're the proof, Mr. Brooks. Everything you documented last night, we need it. Now." Daniel set down his bag and pulled out his laptop. "How much trouble is she in?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "If she can prove Delgado hacked her system, he's finished. If she can't, the board might force her to resign to avoid the scandal. Either way, this is a defining moment for the company." The conference room doors opened and Victoria stepped out. She looked different than she had just hours ago. Her suit was fresh, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. But Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. "You came back," she said. "You needed me to." For a moment, something passed between them. An acknowledgement of the choice he'd made, the cost of that choice, and the strange bond that had formed in the hours they'd spent together rebuilding her security system. "I have everything," Daniel said, gesturing to his laptop. "Every piece of evidence from last night. The intrusion logs, the authentication records, the data transfer protocols. All of it time-stamped and verified." Victoria nodded. "Then let's finish this." She turned and walked back into the conference room. Daniel followed, Chen close behind. The boardroom was exactly what Daniel expected. A massive table surrounded by leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than his car. 11 people sat around the table, a mix of men and women in expensive business attire, all watching the doorway with various expressions of curiosity, irritation, and concern. And at the far end of the table sat Marcus Delgado. Daniel had only met the man twice before, but he recognized him instantly. Delgado was in his late 40s, with the kind of artificial tan that came from expensive salons and perfectly styled silver hair. He wore a navy suit that probably cost $5,000 and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Next to him sat another man Daniel didn't recognize, younger, mid-30s, with the sharp-eyed look of someone who made their living finding legal loopholes. "Members of the board," Victoria said, her voice calm and professional. "This is Daniel Brooks, the cybersecurity contractor who's been conducting our security audit for the past 3 weeks. Mr. Brooks discovered the intrusion on my system last night and documented everything that happened." A woman at the head of the table, 60-ish, with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in corporate power, gestured to an empty chair. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Eleanor Rothstein, board chairwoman. Please have a seat and explain exactly what you found." Daniel set up his laptop, connecting it to the room's presentation system. His hands were steady as he pulled up the files he'd compiled throughout the night. "At approximately 11:34 p.m. last night," he began, "I detected unusual network activity originating from within the company. Someone was executing a packet-sniffing operation targeting Ms. Hale's private network drive." Marcus leaned forward. "Mrs. Rothstein, I object to this entire proceeding. Mr. Brooks is Ms. Hale's employee. His testimony is clearly biased." "I'm not her employee," Daniel said calmly. "I'm an independent contractor hired by your company to assess security vulnerabilities. I have no relationship with Ms. Hale beyond my professional duties." The younger man next to Marcus, his lawyer, Daniel assumed, cleared his throat. "Nevertheless, the timing is suspicious. Ms. Hale presents a proposal to eliminate Mr. Delgado's department, and suddenly, there's a convenient hacking incident? It's awfully convenient." Daniel pulled up the first set of logs on the screen. "These are the network authentication records from last night, time-stamped and independently verified against 3 separate systems. At 11:17 p.m., someone logged into Marcus Delgado's office terminal using his credentials. They then initiated a packet sniffing program designed to copy files from Ms. Hale's private drive. He clicked to the next slide, showing the data transfer logs. Over the next 17 minutes, approximately 3.2 gigabytes of data were copied to an external server. The files included personnel records, financial projections, strategic planning documents, and Ms. Hale's preparation materials for this board meeting. Eleanor Rothstein studied the screen intently. "Mr. Delgado, where were you at 11:17 last night?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I was in my hotel room in New York. I flew out yesterday morning for client meetings. I have receipts, witnesses, phone records, everything you need to verify my alibi." "Then someone used your credentials without authorization," another board member said, a man in his 50s with a thick mustache. "Or," Marcus's lawyer interjected, "Mr. Brooks fabricated these logs. Isn't that well within his technical capabilities?" Daniel had been expecting this. He clicked to another file. "These logs aren't just from our internal systems. I cross-referenced them with our internet service provider's external traffic records. The ISP has independent documentation of the data transfer occurring at the exact times I've specified. I didn't have access to their systems, which means I couldn't have fabricated this evidence." He pulled up another screen. "Furthermore, the authentication signature includes metadata that's unique to Mr. Delgado's specific computer: hardware identifiers, MAC addresses, installed software profiles. Someone was physically sitting at his terminal when this happened." Marcus's expression remained calm, but Daniel saw something flicker behind his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first hint of fear. "My office wasn't locked," Marcus said. "Anyone could have accessed my computer." "Using your password?" Daniel asked. "Which you're required to change every 30 days according to company policy, and which must be at least 12 characters with mixed case numbers and symbols." "Someone could have guessed it, or used a keylogger." Daniel shook his head. "The authentication logs show your credentials were entered correctly on the first attempt. No failed login tries, no hesitation. Whoever accessed your terminal knew exactly what they were doing." Eleanor Rothstein held up a hand. "Mr. Brooks, let's assume for a moment that someone did hack Mr. Delgado's computer and steal this data. What was their objective?" Daniel pulled up the list of files that had been copied. "Based on the specific documents targeted, I'd say the objective was to gather ammunition to undermine Ms. Hale's restructuring proposal. Personnel files that could be used to claim favoritism, financial data that could be taken out of context, strategic planning documents that might reveal vulnerabilities in her presentation." "That's speculation," Marcus's lawyer said sharply. "Is it?" Daniel looked directly at Marcus. "Because that's exactly what you tried to do this morning, isn't it? You presented confidential documents to the board claiming they proved Ms. Hale's proposal was biased and unprofessional." Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I presented documents that were leaked to me by a concerned employee. Documents that raise legitimate questions about Ms. Hale's judgment." "Can you produce this employee?" Eleanor asked. "They requested anonymity. I'm protecting a whistleblower." Victoria spoke for the first time since Daniel had begun his presentation. "May I see these documents you're referencing?" Marcus's lawyer pushed a tablet across the table. Victoria picked it up, scrolled through the files, and then did something Daniel didn't expect. She laughed. It wasn't a polite corporate chuckle. It was genuine amusement, tinged with something that sounded like relief. "These files are corrupted," she said, turning the tablet so the board could see the screen. "They're fragments of code and partial data. Nothing here is readable or usable." Marcus's confident expression finally cracked. "That's impossible. I reviewed these files this morning. They were—" He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted. The room went very quiet. Eleanor Rothstein leaned back in her chair, her eyes moving between Marcus and Victoria. "Mr. Delgado, you just stated you reviewed these files this morning, but you also claimed they were provided to you by an anonymous whistleblower. Which is it?" Marcus's lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Marcus shook him off. "I misspoke. The whistleblower showed me the files. I reviewed them together with my source." "And this source had access to Ms. Hale's private drive," Eleanor pressed. Apparently, without authorization? Marcus said nothing. Daniel clicked to his final slide, the one he'd been saving. There's one more thing the board should know. When I shut down the data transfer last night to stop the hack, I corrupted the files in transit. Anything that was copied to that external server is useless. Unreadable fragments of code that won't open properly in any standard application. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Which means the only way Mr. Delgado could have obtained readable copies of Miss Hale's confidential files is if he had them before the corruption occurred, before I stopped the hack, which would place him in direct control of the intrusion. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus stood up slowly, his face flushed. This is a setup. Ms. Hale orchestrated this entire scenario to discredit me before I could expose her unethical practices. What unethical practices? Victoria asked, her voice dangerously calm. Please, Marcus, tell the board exactly what you think I've done wrong. You're eliminating my department to consolidate your own power. You're removing the people who question your decisions, who provide oversight, who keep you accountable. I'm eliminating a redundant department to improve company efficiency and competitiveness. Your division's functions can be absorbed by automation and existing teams. It's not personal, Marcus. It's business. My people have been with this company for years. They've earned their positions. And they'll be offered severance packages and job placement assistance. No one is being thrown out on the street. Victoria's eyes hardened. But what you did, stealing confidential data, attempting to sabotage a board presentation, compromising corporate security, that's not just personal, Marcus. That's criminal. Eleanor Rothstein stood. Mr. Delgado, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I expect a direct answer. Did you, personally or through an intermediary, access Ms. Hale's private files without authorization? Marcus looked around the table, seeing the expressions on the other board members' faces. Skepticism, disappointment, anger. His lawyer leaned close and whispered something Daniel couldn't hear. I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me, Marcus said finally. Eleanor nodded slowly. Then I'm afraid I have no choice, Mr. Delgado. You are suspended from all duties effective immediately pending a full investigation into these allegations. You will surrender your company credentials, your access cards, and any company property in your possession. Security will escort you from the building. Marcus's face went white. Eleanor, you can't. I can, and I am. This board takes security breaches seriously, Mr. Delgado. If the investigation confirms what Mr. Brooks has presented, you will be terminated and we will pursue criminal charges. If it exonerates you, we'll discuss your future with the company at that time. But until we have clarity, you're suspended. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as if they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Marcus gathered his things with shaking hands, his lawyer following close behind, already on his phone, presumably calling for backup. As Marcus passed Daniel's chair, he stopped. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. I stopped a theft, Daniel replied. That's all. Marcus leaned closer. You've made an enemy today, Mr. Brooks. I have friends in this industry, powerful friends. You'll regret this. Daniel met his gaze steadily. I've faced worse than you, Mr. Delgado. Have a nice day. The security guards led Marcus from the room. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Eleanor turned to Victoria. Ms. Hale, I apologize on behalf of this board for what you've been subjected to. No executive should have to defend themselves against sabotage from their own team. Thank you, Eleanor. That said, we still need to discuss your restructuring proposal on its merits. Are you prepared to present the full plan? Victoria straightened, and Daniel saw the CEO emerge fully, confident, prepared, ready. I am. Then let's proceed. Daniel began packing up his laptop, assuming he was dismissed, but Eleanor gestured for him to stay. Mr. Brooks, given your intimate knowledge of our security vulnerabilities, I'd like you to remain for the discussion. We may have questions about implementation and data protection. So Daniel stayed, sitting quietly while Victoria presented her restructuring plan. She was brilliant, clear, concise, backing every claim with data and every projection with evidence. She addressed concerns before they could be raised, offered alternatives when board members pushed back, and demonstrated a command of the material that left no doubt she'd spent months preparing for this moment. The operations department would be phased out over 6 months. Affected employees would receive generous severance packages and priority consideration for other positions within the company. The functions previously handled by that division would be distributed across existing teams and new automated systems. The projected savings were substantial. The efficiency gains were measurable. The strategic advantages were clear. At 11:43 a.m., the board voted, 9 in favor, 2 abstaining, none opposed. Victoria's restructuring plan was approved. Eleanor stood and extended her hand. Congratulations, Ms. Hale. I know this wasn't easy, but you've demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. Moving forward, you have this board's full support. Victoria shook her hand, and Daniel saw something in her expression he hadn't seen before. Not triumph exactly, more like relief mixed with exhaustion, mixed with the quiet satisfaction of a battle won. The board members filed out, several stopping to congratulate Victoria or shake Daniel's hand. Within 10 minutes, the conference room was empty except for the two of them and Richard Chen, who was gathering papers at the far end of the table. Victoria sank into a chair. That, she said, was the longest 3 hours of my life. Daniel smiled. You were impressive in there. I was prepared, thanks to you. She looked at him. I heard you drove back from halfway to Milwaukee. You missed seeing your daughter. She'll forgive me eventually. Will you forgive yourself? The question hit harder than Daniel expected. He thought about Emma's voice on the phone, small and hurt. Thought about all the other promises he'd broken, all the other times work had come first. I don't know, he admitted. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I don't have children, she said finally. Never wanted them, honestly, but I've watched enough of my friends struggle with the balance to know it's impossible. You can't be everything to everyone. Sometimes you have to make hard choices. Doesn't make them easier. No, it doesn't. Richard Chen approached with a folder. Ms. Hale, I've prepared the documentation for Mr. Delgado's suspension and the investigation protocol. I'll need your signature on several forms. Victoria stood. Give me 10 minutes, Richard. I need to make a phone call first. Chen nodded and left the room. Victoria turned to Daniel. Walk with me? They left the conference room and headed toward her office. The executive floor was buzzing now, assistants hurrying past with coffee and documents, junior executives clustered in whispered conversations, the machinery of corporate life grinding forward after the morning's drama. When they reached Victoria's office, she closed the door behind them and moved to the windows, looking out at the city below. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay. What you did last night, staying here helping me, documenting everything, that went far beyond your contract obligations. You could have reported the hack and walked away. Instead, you spent the entire night rebuilding my security system and gathering evidence. Why? Daniel considered the question carefully. My wife used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when no one would ever know. When I found that intrusion, I had a choice. Report it through proper channels and let someone else handle it, or deal with it directly. One option was safer, the other was right. And you always choose right over safe? I try to, doesn't always work out. Victoria turned from the window. I want to offer you a job, full-time position as Director of Cybersecurity. Competitive salary, benefits, equity stake in the company. You'd have full authority over all our security protocols and a team to manage. Daniel was surprised by how much the offer tempted him. A stable job. Good money. Interesting work. The kind of position that would let him provide for Emma without constantly chasing contracts and worrying about next month's rent. That's generous, he said carefully. But you're going to say no. I'm going to say I need to think about it. My life is complicated right now. Emma needs stability, and taking a full-time corporate position would mean less flexibility, more hours, more pressure. I'm not sure I can give you what you need and still be the father she deserves. Victoria nodded, understanding. The offer stands. Think about it. Take your time. And if the answer is no, I'll respect that. Thank you. She moved to her desk and wrote something on a piece of company letterhead, then sealed it in an envelope. Either way, I'm paying you for last night. This is a check for 40 hours at triple your contract rate, plus a bonus for exceptional service. Non-negotiable. Daniel took the envelope. That's too much. It's not nearly enough. You saved my career, Daniel. Probably saved this company from a very ugly internal war. That's worth more than I can put in a check. There was a knock at the door. Chen appeared with the folder of documents. Sorry to interrupt, but these need your signature before I can proceed with the investigation. Of course. Victoria took the folder and began signing forms. Daniel moved toward the door. I should go. Let you get back to work. Victoria looked up. Daniel, wait. He paused. She set down the pen and crossed the office to where he stood. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. For showing up when it mattered. For being someone I could trust. For reminding me that there are still people in this world who do the right thing just because it's right. But you would have done the same for me. Victoria smiled. Maybe, but you did it first. She extended her hand. Daniel shook it, and for a moment they stood there in the doorway of her corner office. A CEO and a contractor who'd spent one long night fighting a battle that had tested both of them in different ways. Then Daniel stepped into the hallway and headed for the elevator. He was halfway across the parking lot when his phone rang. Emma's aunt. I know you're probably still busy, she said, but I wanted you to know Emma's okay. She was upset for a while, but we went to the park and she made friends with a dog. She's already talking about what you're going to do together this weekend. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Can I talk to her? She's taking a nap right now, but I'll have her call you when she wakes up. Thanks, Linda. I mean it. Just don't break your promise this weekend, Daniel. She can handle disappointment once, but if you do it again, I won't. This weekend is just for her. I promise. Daniel climbed into his car and sat there for a moment, the envelope from Victoria resting on the passenger seat. Through the windshield, he could see the Meridian Tower rising against the afternoon sky, 42 floors of glass and steel and corporate ambition. Somewhere up there, Victoria was signing forms and preparing for the next crisis, the next battle, the next test of her leadership. And somewhere north in Milwaukee, his daughter was sleeping, probably dreaming of dolphins and aquariums, and the father who'd promised to take her. Daniel started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, heading north once again. This time, nothing was going to stop him from getting there. The drive to Milwaukee took longer than Daniel expected. Traffic backed up near the state line where construction had narrowed the highway to a single lane, and by the time he pulled into his sister-in-law's driveway, the afternoon sun was already starting its descent toward the horizon. Linda's house was a modest two-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood where kids rode bikes on the sidewalk, and people still knew their neighbors' names. Daniel sat in the car for a moment, engine off, gathering himself. The envelope from Victoria sat in his glove compartment, still unopened. He'd deal with that later. Right now, all that mattered was the little girl waiting inside. Linda answered the door before he could knock. She was Sarah's younger sister, 31 to Sarah's would have been 37, with the same dark hair and quick smile that Daniel had fallen in love with all those years ago. Seeing Linda always hurt a little, like looking at a photograph that had faded around the edges. She's in the backyard, Linda said quietly. Fair warning, she's still upset. I tried to explain that sometimes adults have responsibilities, but 7-year-olds don't really care about logic. I know, thanks for covering for me. I didn't cover for you, Daniel. I told her the truth, that you had to work, that it was important, that you'd be here as soon as you could. Linda's expression softened. But she's been asking all day when you're coming, so maybe don't keep her waiting any longer. Daniel walked through the house, past the living room where Emma's stuffed animals were scattered across the couch, past the kitchen where crayon drawings decorated the refrigerator, and out the back door to the small fenced yard beyond. Emma sat on the wooden swing set that Linda's husband had built last summer, dragging her feet in the dirt, not really swinging. She wore her favorite purple jacket and the light-up sneakers Daniel had bought her for her birthday. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that Linda had clearly done. Daniel still hadn't mastered the art of making them even. She didn't look up when he approached. Hey, sweetheart, Daniel said softly. Emma kicked at the dirt with her glowing shoe. You said you were coming this morning. I know I did, and I'm really sorry I couldn't make it. Aunt Linda said you had to work. I did. Something unexpected happened and people needed my help. More important than me? The question landed like a knife between his ribs. Daniel moved closer and knelt in the dirt beside the swing, putting himself at her eye level. Nothing is more important than you, Emma. Nothing in the whole world. But sometimes I have to help other people too, even when it means disappointing you. And I hate that. I hate it so much. Emma finally looked at him, her brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, searching his face. Mommy used to help people too, she said quietly. She'd stay late at her office sometimes, but she always came home for bedtime stories. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Emma rarely talked about Sarah anymore. The memories were fading, becoming more abstract, which somehow hurt worse than the raw grief of those first months. She did, Daniel agreed. Your mom was really good at balancing everything, better than I am. I miss her. Me too, sweetheart, every single day. Emma slipped off the swing and into Daniel's arms, burying her face against his shoulder. He held her tight, feeling her small body shake with silent tears. 7 years old and already carrying the weight of loss that no child should have to bear. They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter, grieving together in a backyard in Milwaukee, while the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Finally, Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. Are we still going to the aquarium this weekend? Absolutely. Saturday morning, first thing, just you and me. Promise? I promise. No work, no emergencies, no excuses. The whole weekend is yours. Emma studied his face, deciding whether to trust him. Okay, she said finally, but if you break this promise, I'm going to be really, really mad. Deal. They went inside as the evening settled in. Linda had made spaghetti for dinner, and they ate around the small kitchen table while Emma talked about her week at school. The science project on ocean ecosystems, the boy who'd tried to kiss her at recess and gotten sent to the principal's office, the new library book she wanted to read about a girl who discovered she could talk to sea creatures. Daniel listened, laughed at the right moments, asked questions, and felt some of the tension from the past 24 hours finally begin to ease. This was what mattered, not corner offices or corporate intrigue or the complex web of adult responsibilities. Just this: his daughter, safe and loved, sharing her world with him. After dinner, Emma wanted to show him the fort she'd built in the guest bedroom using blankets and chairs. Daniel crawled inside the makeshift structure and let her explain the elaborate rules she'd created for the invisible creatures that lived there. Then they watched a movie about talking penguins. Emma curled against his side, her breathing gradually slowing as sleep crept up on her. By 9 p.m., she was asleep in the guest bed, her favorite stuffed dolphin clutched under one arm. Daniel stood in the doorway watching her sleep, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face. These moments felt increasingly precious. He knew that soon enough she'd be a teenager, then an adult, and these quiet evenings would become memories he'd replay when his house felt too empty. Linda appeared beside him with 2 glasses of wine. Come on, she said. She'll sleep for hours. Let's talk. They settled on the front porch, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of a television through someone's open window. So, Linda said after a moment, what was so important that you had to bail on Emma this morning? Daniel told her everything: the hack, the all-night encryption rebuild, the board meeting confrontation, Marcus Delgado's suspension. Linda listened without interrupting, occasionally sipping her wine, her expression shifting between surprise and concern. You made an enemy today, she said when he finished. This Delgado guy sounds like the type who holds grudges. Maybe, but what was I supposed to do? Let him get away with it? Most people would have. Most people would have documented what they found and let the company sort it out. You didn't have to spend all night fixing her computer. You didn't have to come back for the board meeting. You chose to get involved. Sarah would have done the same thing. Linda smiled sadly. Yeah, she would have. My sister never could walk past someone who needed help, even when it cost her. She paused. But Daniel, you're not Sarah. You don't have to be the hero every time, especially when you have Emma to think about. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to fill the hole Sarah left by being everything to everyone. And that's not sustainable. Daniel stared out at the quiet street, watching a cat slink between the parked cars. Victoria offered me a job, he said. Full-time position. Director of cybersecurity. Good money, benefits, everything. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Part of me wants to. It would mean stability for Emma. No more worrying about finding the next contract, but it would also mean less flexibility, more hours, more pressure. More nights away from Emma. Yeah, Linda set down her wine glass. Can I give you some advice you didn't ask for? Sure. Stop making every decision based on what you think Sarah would have wanted. She's gone, Daniel. And I love my sister more than anything, but she's not here to help you raise Emma or figure out your career or navigate any of this. You have to start making choices based on what you want, what you need, what's actually best for you and Emma right now. The words stung because they were true. For 3 years, Daniel had been trying to live up to the memory of his wife, the brilliant lawyer who fought for justice, the devoted mother who always made time for bedtime stories, the woman who somehow balanced everything with grace and competence. But he wasn't Sarah. He never would be. I'll think about it, Daniel said. They finished their wine in comfortable silence. Then Linda showed him to the guest room where Emma was sleeping, and Daniel stretched out on the floor beside her bed with a spare blanket, the way he used to when she was younger and had nightmares. He lay there in the darkness, listening to his daughter's breathing, and thought about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The crisis, the confrontation, the choices he'd made and the consequences that would follow. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Victoria. Hope you made it to your daughter safely. Thank you again for everything. Daniel typed back. Made it. Thanks. There was a pause, then another message appeared. The investigation into Delgado starts Monday. Legal will probably want to interview you again. Is that okay? That's fine. Whatever you need. Another pause. The job offer is still open. No pressure, but I meant what I said. You'd be an asset to this company. Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Through the window, he could see the stars emerging in the clear night sky. Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about dolphins. I'll let you know soon, he typed. Still thinking about it. Take your time. Good night, Daniel. Good night. He set the phone aside and closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept returning to the corner office, to Victoria standing by the windows watching the sunrise, to the strange connection that had formed between two people during one crisis-filled night. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Emma was awake at 7, bouncing on the bed with enough energy to power a small city. Aquarium Day, she announced. You promised. Daniel groaned playfully and pulled her down for a hug. I promised. Let's get breakfast first, okay? They said goodbye to Linda and drove into the city, stopping at a diner Emma loved for pancakes and hot chocolate. Then they spent the next 4 hours at the Milwaukee Public Aquarium, Emma's nose pressed against glass as she watched stingrays glide past, jellyfish pulse through artificial currents, and tropical fish dart between coral structures. Daniel followed behind, taking pictures on his phone, answering her endless stream of questions, letting the simple joy of his daughter's excitement wash away the exhaustion and stress of the week. Daddy, look! Emma grabbed his hand and pulled him toward a new exhibit. They have dolphins! The dolphin tank was massive, with an underwater viewing area where visitors could watch the sleek creatures swim overhead. Emma stood transfixed as a pair of dolphins performed synchronized loops, their movements graceful and playful. They're so smart, Emma breathed. Did you know they can recognize themselves in mirrors? My teacher told us. That means they know who they are. That's pretty special, Daniel agreed. When I grow up, I'm going to study dolphins and whales and all the ocean animals. Marine biologist? Yeah, is that hard? It's a lot of school, a lot of science and math. But if you work hard, you can do anything you want, sweetheart. Emma leaned against him, still watching the dolphins. Mommy would have liked this, she said quietly. Daniel's chest tightened. She would have loved it. She always said the ocean was magical. Do you think she can see me, like from heaven or wherever she is? It was a question Emma asked sometimes, usually when Daniel least expected it. He'd never known quite how to answer. The honest truth that he had no idea what happened after death, or the comforting lie that Sarah was watching over them always. I think, he said carefully, that wherever your mom is, she knows how much we love her, and she's proud of the amazing person you're becoming. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She pressed her hand against the glass as a dolphin swam close, its eyes seeming to look directly at her. They stayed until the aquarium closed, Emma reluctant to leave until Daniel promised they'd come back soon. On the drive home, she fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day's adventures. Daniel carried her into the apartment when they arrived back in Chicago late that evening. Their home was a modest two-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, but clean and safe and filled with the accumulated evidence of their life together. Emma's artwork on the walls, photos from happier times, the small touches that made a space feel like home. He tucked Emma into bed, still wearing her clothes from the day, too tired to wake her for pajamas. Then he retreated to the living room and finally opened the envelope Victoria had given him. The check was for an amount that made Daniel's eyes widen. More than he'd made in the past 3 months combined. Enough to cover rent for half a year, to put away for Emma's college fund, to breathe a little easier about money for the first time since Sarah's medical bills had drained their savings. There was a note attached, written in Victoria's precise handwriting. Daniel, you earned every penny of this and more. The job offer stands if you want it, but I'll understand if you choose to remain independent. Either way, I hope we can stay in touch. You reminded me that there are still people in this world worth trusting. That's a rare gift. Thank you. Victoria. At the bottom, she'd written her personal cell number. Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the check and the note. Linda's words echoed in his mind. Stop making decisions based on what Sarah would have wanted. Start making choices based on what was actually best for him and Emma right now. What did he want? Security, stability, a way to provide for his daughter without constantly worrying about the next contract, but also flexibility, freedom, the ability to be there when Emma needed him, to not miss bedtime stories or school performances or weekend aquarium trips. Could he have both? His phone rang. Unknown number, but Daniel answered anyway. Mr. Brooks, this is Richard Chen from Hale Industries. I apologize for calling on a Saturday evening. It's fine. What can I do for you? I wanted to give you a heads up. The investigation into Marcus Delgado uncovered some concerning information. It appears Mr. Delgado has been in contact with several competitors, possibly shopping proprietary information. We're expanding the scope of the investigation, and we may need your technical expertise again. Daniel closed his eyes. When? Monday, if possible. We need someone to audit Delgado's communications and data transfers over the past 6 months. It's a big job, but Ms. Hale specifically requested you for it. I'll need to think about it. Of course. But Mr. Brooks, if even half of what we suspect is true, this could be a major corporate espionage case. Your testimony and technical analysis would be crucial. After Chen hung up, Daniel stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Chicago stretched out below, millions of lives intersecting in invisible ways. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably still working, fighting whatever new battles had emerged after the old ones. Somewhere out there, Marcus Delgado was planning his next move, whether that meant legal defense or revenge or something else entirely. And here, in this small apartment, Daniel had a choice to make. He walked quietly to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She'd kicked off her blankets and was sprawled across the bed in that boneless way children slept, completely relaxed, trusting that the world was safe because her father was there to protect her. That trust was both the most precious and most terrifying thing Daniel had ever been given. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Richard said he called you. I know it's a lot to ask, no pressure, but I could really use your help with this. Daniel thought about the all-night encryption rebuild, about standing in front of the board presenting evidence that destroyed a man's career, about the moment when Victoria had handed him her business card and said he'd reminded her that there were still people worth trusting. He typed back, I'll be there Monday. But after this, I need to make some decisions about what comes next. Victoria's response came quickly. Fair enough. Thank you, Daniel. I owe you. You don't owe me anything. See you Monday. He set the phone down and returned to Emma's room, carefully pulling the blankets back over her. She murmured something in her sleep, a fragment of a dream he'd never know. I'm doing my best, sweetheart, Daniel whispered. I hope that's enough. Sunday passed in a blur of normalcy. Breakfast at their favorite diner, a trip to the park where Emma played on the swings while Daniel sat on a bench catching up on email, grocery shopping where Emma insisted they needed cookies, and Daniel pretended to put up a fight before surrendering. Dinner at the kitchen table, bath time, bedtime story, goodnight kiss. The routine of fatherhood, the small moments that somehow meant everything. Monday morning came too soon. Daniel dropped Emma at school. She'd returned from Milwaukee the night before, so she wouldn't miss her classes, and headed to the Meridian Tower. The building looked different in the sharp morning light, less imposing than it had seemed that first night when he'd discovered the hack. Richard Chen met him in the lobby with visitor credentials and a thick folder. "Everything we have on Delgado is in here. Email records, phone logs, data transfer histories. We need you to go through it and identify any suspicious activity." You said this might be corporate espionage. "We found encrypted communications with executives at 3 competing firms. We can't access the content, but the frequency and timing are suspicious. If he was selling our proprietary encryption algorithms..." Chen didn't need to finish the sentence. A breach like that could destroy Hale Industries' competitive advantage, tank their stock price, and potentially trigger lawsuits from clients whose security had been compromised. Daniel took the folder. "Where should I work?" "We've set up a secure workstation in the IT department. Everything you need is there." The IT department occupied half of the 37th floor. Daniel was shown to a corner cubicle with multiple monitors and more computing power than most people would ever need. He settled in and began the painstaking work of digital forensics. Hours passed in a blur of log files and metadata. Daniel worked methodically, building a timeline of Delgado's communications and comparing them against Hale Industries' proprietary project schedules. A pattern emerged, ugly and damning. Every time the company developed a new encryption protocol, Delgado had meetings with competitors within days. Every time they filed a patent application, Delgado sent encrypted messages to external parties. Every time they were preparing for a major client presentation, Delgado accessed files he had no business viewing. It wasn't proof of espionage by itself, but it was suspicious as hell. Around 2 p.m., Victoria appeared at his cubicle. "How's it going?" Daniel gestured at the screens full of data. "Your instincts were right. Delgado's been in contact with competitors for at least 8 months. I can't prove what they discussed without breaking the encryption, but the timing is too coincidental." Victoria pulled up a chair, studying the timeline Daniel had created. "Can you break the encryption?" "Maybe. It depends on what algorithm he used, but even attempting it could have legal implications. If this becomes a criminal case, we need to make sure the evidence is obtained properly." "What do you recommend?" "Turn this over to law enforcement. Let them get a warrant for Delgado's communications. They have resources we don't, and anything they find will be admissible in court." Victoria nodded slowly. "Richard suggested the same thing. I just wanted to confirm we had enough to justify involving the FBI." "You do. This goes way beyond internal corporate discipline. If Delgado was selling your proprietary algorithms, that's theft of trade secrets, federal crime, prison time." The weight of it settled over them. What had started as Daniel noticing a tiny delay in network traffic had uncovered something much larger, a systematic betrayal that had been happening for months, maybe longer. "I should have seen it sooner," Victoria said quietly. "The warning signs were there. His resistance to security protocols, his insistence on maintaining access to systems he didn't need. I thought he was just territorial. I didn't realize he was covering his tracks. He was good at hiding it. Most people wouldn't have caught it even now." "But you did." Daniel shrugged. "I notice things. It's what I do." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then stood. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." She led him to the executive floor, but instead of her corner office, they went to a smaller room down the hall. Inside was a conference table, whiteboards covering the walls, and several people Daniel didn't recognize working on laptops. "This," Victoria said, "is the security task force I'm putting together. In light of what happened with Delgado, I'm completely restructuring how we handle data protection and internal monitoring. We need someone to lead it." One of the people at the table looked up, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. "Mr. Brooks? I'm Patricia Hall, Chief Information Officer. Ms. Hale has told me about your work. I'm impressed." Daniel shook her hand. "Thank you. We'd like to offer you a position leading this task force," Patricia continued. "It would be a 6-month contract initially, with the possibility of conversion to permanent. You'd have full authority over security protocols, a team of analysts reporting to you, and direct access to executive leadership. It wasn't quite the same offer Victoria had made before. This was more defined, with clear boundaries and an endpoint, a way to help without surrendering his independence entirely. What would the hours look like? Daniel asked. Flexible, Victoria said. We know you have a daughter. The work matters more than the schedule. As long as the job gets done, I don't care if you're working from home at midnight or in the office at noon. Daniel looked around the room, at the whiteboards covered with security diagrams, at the team that would potentially be working under him, at the opportunity to build something meaningful. Can I have 24 hours to think about it? Take 48, Victoria said. This is a big decision. Make sure it's the right one. That evening, Daniel picked up Emma from her after-school program and took her to their favorite pizza place. They sat in a corner booth, Emma working on a coloring sheet the restaurant provided while Daniel tried to organize his thoughts. Daddy, you're being quiet, Emma observed. Just thinking, sweetheart. About what? About work. About whether to take a new job. Emma looked up from her coloring. Would you have to go away? No, I'd still be here in Chicago, but I might be busier sometimes. Busier than now? It was a fair question. His current life as a contractor meant unpredictable hours, sometimes feast and sometimes famine. This new position would be different, steadier, but potentially more demanding. Different busy, Daniel said. More regular schedule, but also more responsibility. Emma considered this while carefully coloring a pizza slice purple. Would you still come to my school things? Always. That's non-negotiable. And bedtime stories? Every night I'm home. Then I think you should do it, if it makes you happy. Daniel smiled. What makes you happy is what makes me happy, Em. Then we're both happy. Can I have more pepperoni? They finished dinner and went home. Daniel helped Emma with her homework, read her the next chapter in the book about the girl who could talk to sea creatures, and tucked her into bed. Then he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Victoria's business card and thought about the future. The old Daniel, the one who'd existed before Sarah died, would have jumped at this opportunity without hesitation. But that Daniel had also missed baseball games because of work emergencies and forgotten anniversaries because of project deadlines. That Daniel had taken his wife for granted, assuming there would always be more time. This Daniel knew better, knew that time was finite and precious and couldn't be reclaimed once it was gone. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. She answered on the second ring. Daniel, have you made a decision? Not yet, but I have some conditions if I take the position. I'm listening. First, I need guaranteed flexibility for Emma. School events, emergencies, sick days. I need to be able to be there without question or judgment. Done. Second, I want the authority to hire my own team. People I trust with the skills we actually need. Agreed. Third, this is a 6-month trial for both of us. If it's not working, for either of us, we can end it without hard feelings. Fair enough? Anything else? Daniel took a breath. Yeah, one more thing. I need to know this matters. That we're not just playing corporate games or protecting profits. I need to know we're actually making a difference. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Come to the office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I want to show you something. What? You'll see. Just trust me. They hung up, and Daniel sat in the darkness of his kitchen, listening to the quiet sounds of his daughter sleeping down the hall. Trust. It kept coming back to that. He'd trusted Victoria enough to spend the night rebuilding her security system. She'd trusted him enough to stand up in front of the board with evidence that could have been fabricated. Now she was asking him to trust her again, to take a leap into unknown territory. The question was whether he was ready to make that jump. Daniel arrived at the Meridian Tower at 9:45 the next morning, 15 minutes early, because old habits died hard. The lobby was bustling with the usual Tuesday morning rush, executives in tailored suits clutching coffee cups, junior associates hurrying toward elevators, delivery personnel wheeling carts of packages toward the loading dock. He'd become familiar enough with the building over the past month that the security guard recognized him with a nod. Victoria met him on the 40th floor, not in her corner office, but in a smaller conference room Daniel hadn't seen before. She wore a charcoal pantsuit and looked like she'd already been working for hours, though her expression brightened when she saw him. Thanks for coming, she said, gesturing to a chair. I want to show you why this company exists, why security isn't just about protecting profits. She pulled up a presentation on the wall-mounted screen. The first slide showed a photograph of a woman in her 30s, smiling at the camera, holding a young child. This is Melissa Chen. She was a journalist in Singapore covering government corruption. 3 years ago, she used our encryption software to communicate with sources and protect her data. When the authorities tried to seize her devices, they couldn't access her files. Our encryption held. She was able to get her evidence to international media before they could silence her. Victoria clicked to the next slide. A man in his 60s standing in front of a hospital. Dr. James Okonkwo. He runs a medical research facility in Lagos studying infectious diseases. His team uses our software to protect patient data and research findings. Last year, hackers tried to steal their work on a new malaria treatment. Our security systems stopped them. That research is now saving lives across West Africa. Another slide. A young couple standing in front of a small house. Sarah and Michael Brennan. They're whistleblowers who exposed safety violations at a major manufacturing plant. They used our encrypted communication platform to coordinate with federal investigators without their employer finding out. 15 workers are alive today because of what they revealed. Victoria turned off the screen and faced Daniel. We're not just protecting corporate secrets and quarterly earnings. We're protecting people who need security to do dangerous, important work. Journalists, activists, medical researchers, human rights workers, people who would be silenced or killed if their information wasn't secure. She pulled out a folder and set it on the table. This is just a sample. We have hundreds of clients like this. And when Marcus Delgado was selling our encryption algorithms to competitors, he wasn't just committing corporate espionage. He was potentially compromising the safety of every single person who trusts our security. Daniel opened the folder and scanned the contents. Case studies, testimonials, photographs of people whose faces reflected hope and determination and the kind of courage that came from standing up against overwhelming power. That journalist in Singapore, Daniel said quietly. If someone had broken your encryption, she'd probably be in prison, or worse. The weight of it settled over Daniel like a physical presence. This wasn't about corporate politics or competitive advantage. Lives hung in the balance. Real people depending on the integrity of systems that Daniel could help protect. The investigation into Delgado, he said. Have you turned it over to the FBI? Yesterday afternoon. They're treating it as a major case, theft of trade secrets with national security implications. Victoria sat down across from him. But here's the thing, Daniel. Even if they catch Delgado and prosecute him successfully, the damage is done. Our algorithms might be compromised. Our clients might be at risk. We need to rebuild everything from the ground up. And we need someone who understands both the technical side and the human cost. That's what the Security Task Force is for. That's what you're for. Patricia Hall is brilliant with systems and protocols, but she thinks in terms of firewalls and access controls. You think in terms of people. You saw a network anomaly and immediately understood someone was trying to hurt another person. That's the perspective we need. Daniel looked at the photographs scattered across the table. All those faces, all those lives. If I take this job, he said slowly, I need you to promise me something. What? That we never forget why we're doing this. That it's not about market share or profit margins. That every decision we make, we ask ourselves if it's protecting the people who need protection. Victoria extended her hand. You have my word. Daniel shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the sincerity in her eyes. Then I'm in. 6 months, with the conditions we discussed. Welcome to Hale Industries, Director Brooks. The title felt strange, formal, like putting on a suit that didn't quite fit yet. But as Victoria walked him through the details of the position, salary, benefits, team structure, reporting relationships, Daniel felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just another contract. This was a commitment to something larger than himself. They spent the next hour discussing strategy. The Security Task Force would have 5 members initially, including Daniel. He'd need to recruit specialists in different areas: network security, encryption protocols, threat assessment, incident response. Victoria gave him full authority to hire whoever he needed, with a budget that made Daniel's eyes widen. I want the best, Victoria said. I don't care if they're working for competitors or living in their parents' basement coding all night. Find the people who are brilliant and trustworthy and bring them here. That's a tall order. That's why I'm hiring you. Around noon, Richard Chen joined them with updates on the FBI investigation. Federal agents had executed search warrants on Delgado's home and office, seizing computers, phones, and storage devices. They'd also identified the external server where the stolen data had been routed, a facility in Eastern Europe with known connections to corporate espionage operations. They're moving fast, Chen said. The lead investigator told me they consider this a priority case. Too many potential national security implications to let it drag out. What about Delgado himself? Victoria asked. He's lawyered up, not talking, but his attorney is already making noise about a plea deal, which suggests they know the evidence is solid. Daniel pulled up the forensic timeline he'd created on his laptop. There's something else you should know. When I was going through Delgado's communication logs, I found encrypted messages to an internal email address here at Hale Industries. Someone inside the company was coordinating with him. The room went silent. Are you sure? Victoria asked, her voice tight. The pattern is clear. Delgado would send an encrypted message to this internal address, and within hours he'd have access to files he shouldn't have been able to reach. Someone was helping him bypass security protocols. Can you identify who? Daniel shook his head. The internal address is routed through a proxy server. It could be anyone with technical knowledge and access to the building. But whoever it is, they're still here. Victoria and Chen exchanged a look that Daniel couldn't quite read. This stays between us, Victoria said finally. Not even the FBI knows about this yet. If we tip our hand too early, whoever's helping Delgado could destroy evidence or disappear. What do you want me to do? Daniel asked. Find them, quietly. Use whatever resources you need, but don't let anyone know what you're looking for. It was a hunt now. Daniel had uncovered not just one traitor, but a network. The thought sent a chill down his spine, but there was also something clarifying about it. This was exactly the kind of problem he was good at solving. The meeting broke up around 1 p.m. Victoria had a lunch appointment with a potential client, and Chen needed to coordinate with the FBI. Daniel was left alone in the conference room with his laptop and a new mission. He started by mapping the network topology, identifying every access point and user account in the system. Then he cross-referenced those against the timestamps of Delgado's suspicious file accesses, looking for overlapping patterns. Hours passed. Daniel barely noticed the afternoon fading into evening. He ordered food from the cafeteria without leaving his screen, his mind fully engaged in the puzzle. Around 7 p.m., his phone buzzed. Emma's after-school program. Mr. Brooks, I'm sorry to bother you, but Emma's still here. We close at 6:30, and we've been trying to reach you for the past half hour. Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd been so absorbed in the work that he'd completely lost track of time. I'm so sorry. I'm on my way right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He grabbed his laptop and messenger bag, practically running for the elevator. The guilt was overwhelming. His first day in the new position, and he'd already failed at the one thing that mattered most. The after-school program was in a community center 15 minutes from Daniel's apartment. He made it in 12, parking illegally, and rushing inside to find Emma sitting alone in the main room with one tired-looking staff member. Daddy! Emma ran to him, and Daniel couldn't tell if she was relieved or angry or both. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I lost track of time at work. The staff member, a college-aged woman named Ashley, gave him a look that was equal parts understanding and judgment. We really need you to be on time, Mr. Brooks. We have other responsibilities after hours. I know. It won't happen again. But even as he said it, Daniel wondered if that was true. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. The new job consuming his attention, pulling him away from Emma, making him into the kind of father who forgot pickup times and missed important moments. In the car, Emma was quiet. Too quiet. Are you mad at me? Daniel asked. You promised you'd be different with this new job. I know I did. But you're already forgetting about me. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma, I will never forget about you. Never. You are the most important thing in my life. Then why weren't you there? Daniel pulled over into a parking lot, unable to drive while having this conversation. He turned to face his daughter, seeing the hurt in her eyes, the way she was trying so hard to be brave. Because I made a mistake, he said honestly. I got so focused on work that I stopped paying attention to the time, and that's not okay. I should have set an alarm or asked someone to remind me. I should have made sure I was there when you needed me. Mommy never forgot. It was a low blow, probably unintentional, but it landed hard nonetheless. Your mom was better at balancing things than I am, Daniel admitted. She had systems and schedules and never let anything slip through the cracks. I'm still learning how to do that. Emma wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I don't want you to be Mommy. I just want you to be you, but the you who shows up. Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with tears she'd been holding back. I will do better, he promised. Starting right now. We're going to set up a system. Alarms on my phone, calendar reminders. Whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again. They sat there in the parking lot for a while, father and daughter, working through the hurt and the fear and the challenge of trying to build a life that honored both their needs. Finally, Emma pulled back and looked at him seriously. Can we get ice cream? Daniel laughed despite everything. Absolutely. Extra sprinkles. They went to their favorite ice cream shop and sat at a corner table. Emma ordered strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. Daniel got coffee with chocolate chips, and they talked about her day. The science experiment that had gone wrong when someone mixed the wrong chemicals. The book report she needed to start working on. The boy in her class who'd invited her to his birthday party. Normal things. Everyday moments that somehow felt precious because they were so fragile, so easily lost in the rush of adult responsibilities. When they got home, Daniel helped Emma with her homework while simultaneously setting up an elaborate system of phone alarms and calendar notifications. Every important time, school pickup, bedtime, dinner, got multiple reminders with escalating urgency. This looks complicated, Emma observed, watching him input data. It is, but you're worth it. She smiled at that, and Daniel felt some of the guilt ease. After Emma was in bed, Daniel returned to his laptop and the mystery of the internal collaborator. He worked until midnight, building a profile of potential suspects based on access patterns and technical capability. The list was shorter than he'd feared, but longer than he'd hoped. 17 people had both the skills and the access to help Delgado bypass security. Some were IT staff, others were engineers or developers. A few were from unexpected departments, finance, operations, even human resources. One name stood out, Jennifer Walsh, a senior network administrator who'd been with the company for 6 years. Her access logs showed she'd been working unusual hours around the same times Delgado was stealing files. More tellingly, she'd accessed several administrative backdoors that had no legitimate purpose for her role. Daniel created a detailed report and sent it to Victoria with a note. Possible lead. Need to investigate further before involving FBI. Her response came 10 minutes later, despite the late hour. Good work. Let's meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. And Daniel, get some sleep. He tried, but sleep came fitfully, his mind churning through possibilities and scenarios. What if Walsh realized she was under suspicion? What if she destroyed evidence before they could act? What if there were others involved that he hadn't identified yet? The next morning, Daniel dropped Emma at school with 10 minutes to spare, having set 3 different alarms to ensure he wasn't late. She kissed him goodbye without any of yesterday's tension, which felt like a small victory. Victoria was waiting in her office when Daniel arrived at 8. She'd clearly been there for hours, coffee cup already empty, papers spread across her desk in organized chaos. Tell me about Jennifer Walsh, she said without preamble. Daniel pulled up his analysis on the conference room screen. She's been accessing administrative backdoors that give her elevated privileges across multiple systems. The timing correlates almost perfectly with Delgado's unauthorized file accesses. She's either the collaborator or she's being framed very cleverly. Which do you think it is? Collaborator. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence, and the backdoor accesses require knowledge that an outsider wouldn't have. Victoria studied the data, her expression unreadable. Jennifer's been with us since the beginning. She was employee number 12. I hired her personally. Do you know her well? I thought I did. She's always been reliable, competent, never gave me any reason to doubt her loyalty. People change, or maybe we never really knew them to begin with. Victoria sighed and rubbed her temples. What do you recommend? We need to confront her, but carefully. If she thinks she's cornered, she might panic and destroy evidence. We need to control the conversation. Can you monitor her systems without her knowing? Already doing it. I set up passive monitoring last night. If she tries to delete anything or communicate with Delgado, we'll know immediately. Victoria stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city awakening below. When my husband left me 7 years ago. You know what hurt the most? Not the divorce itself, but finding out he'd been lying for months before he finally worked up the courage to walk out. All those conversations where I thought we were being honest with each other, he was already planning his exit. It made me question everything, every memory, every moment. She turned back to Daniel. That's what this feels like. Marcus, I can understand. He was facing the end of his career and he got desperate. But Jennifer? She had no reason to betray us. She was valued, well compensated, respected. Why would she throw that away? Money, maybe, or blackmail, or ideology. There are a lot of reasons people turn. None of them make this easier. Daniel thought about Sarah, about the way illness had stolen her away piece by piece until the woman he'd loved was just a memory, about how betrayal didn't always come from malice. Sometimes it came from weakness or fear or circumstances beyond anyone's control. No, he agreed. They don't. They decided to confront Walsh that afternoon, after Daniel had time to gather more evidence, and after Victoria could coordinate with Richard Chen on the legal implications. In the meantime, Daniel returned to his new office, a small space on the 37th floor that had been hastily furnished with a desk, 2 monitors, and a filing cabinet. It wasn't much, but it was his, a base of operations for the security task force that was slowly taking shape. Around noon, his monitoring system pinged an alert. Jennifer Walsh had just accessed one of the backdoor systems and was attempting to delete logs from the past 6 months. Daniel immediately called Victoria. She's destroying evidence right now. Can you stop her? I can lock her out, but she'll know someone's watching. Do it. I'm calling security. Daniel executed the lockout protocol, cutting Walsh's administrative access across all systems. 2 floors below, he imagined her staring at her screen in confusion as her command stopped working. His phone rang. Unknown internal extension. This is Daniel Brooks? What the hell did you just do? A woman's voice, angry and scared. You locked me out of the system. Is this Jennifer Walsh? You know it is. I need that access to do my job. Your access has been suspended pending an investigation into unauthorized system usage. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. The backdoor protocols, the log deletions, the coordination with Marcus Delgado. We have evidence, Jennifer. All of it time-stamped and documented. Another pause, longer this time. I want to speak to my attorney. That's your right, but security is on their way to escort you to a conference room where we can discuss this properly. I'd recommend cooperating. The line went dead. 10 minutes later, Daniel joined Victoria and Richard Chen in a secure conference room on the executive floor. Jennifer Walsh sat across the table, flanked by 2 security guards, her face pale but composed. She was younger than Daniel expected, early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and glasses that kept slipping down her nose. She looked like someone who'd be more comfortable with computers than people, which probably explained why she'd been so useful to Delgado. Ms. Walsh, Victoria began, her voice calm but cold. You've been with this company for 6 years. I've trusted you with our most sensitive systems. So I'm going to ask you directly. Have you been helping Marcus Delgado steal confidential information? Jennifer's jaw tightened. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer present. That's your right, Chen said. But I should inform you that we've already turned over evidence to the FBI. This is your opportunity to cooperate before federal charges are filed. What evidence? Daniel slid a tablet across the table showing the access logs and deletion attempts. You've been using administrative backdoors to give Delgado access to files outside his clearance level. You've been deleting security logs to cover the tracks. And 30 minutes ago, you attempted to destroy evidence of these activities. Jennifer stared at the screen, her expression crumbling. He said no one would ever know. He said the security systems weren't sophisticated enough to track it. He was wrong, Daniel said quietly. And now you're both facing federal charges. Oh, Jennifer put her head in her hands. I didn't want to do it. I swear I didn't. But Marcus knew things about me. Things that could have destroyed my career if they came out. Victoria leaned forward. He was blackmailing you? Not exactly, more like he had leverage. A relationship I had with a junior employee a few years ago. Nothing illegal, but it violated company policy. Marcus found out about it and said if I didn't help him, he'd report me to HR. The room was silent for a moment. Why didn't you come to me? Victoria asked, and there was genuine pain in her voice. I would have helped you. We could have dealt with it together. I was scared and stupid, and by the time I realized how deep I was in, it was too late to back out. Chen made notes on his legal pad. If you're willing to testify against Delgado and provide full cooperation to the FBI investigation, we might be able to negotiate a reduced sentence. But you need to tell us everything, right now. Jennifer looked around the table at the three faces watching her. Victoria's disappointment, Chen's professional detachment, Daniel's quiet assessment. Okay, she said finally, I'll tell you everything. For the next 2 hours, Jennifer Walsh described in detail how Marcus Delgado had recruited her, what information he'd stolen, and who he'd been selling it to. The scope was even worse than Daniel had feared, not just competitors, but foreign entities with questionable intentions. The journalist in Singapore whose encryption had protected her? Jennifer had helped Delgado sell a backdoor key that could potentially compromise her communications. The medical researcher in Nigeria? His data security had been undermined by algorithms that Delgado had traded for cash. Every revelation made Victoria's expression harder, more controlled, like she was building walls to keep the emotion from overwhelming her. When Jennifer finally finished, Chen closed his notepad. We'll arrange for FBI agents to take your formal statement. In the meantime, you're suspended from all duties. Your company credentials are revoked, and you're not to discuss this investigation with anyone. Do you understand? Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, looking at Victoria. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I'm so sorry. Victoria stood without responding and walked out of the conference room. Daniel followed, leaving Chen to handle the legal details. He found her in her office, standing at the windows with her arms crossed, staring out at the Chicago skyline. How many people are at risk because of what she did? Victoria asked without turning around. I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. We'll identify every compromised system, every client who might be vulnerable, and we'll fix it. Some things can't be fixed, Daniel. That journalist could be arrested tomorrow because her encryption isn't as secure as she thinks. That doctor could have his research stolen by competitors. People could die because Jennifer Walsh was too scared to tell the truth. Daniel moved to stand beside her at the window. That's not on you. You didn't betray anyone. Delgado and Walsh made their choices. The responsibility is theirs. But the consequences are mine. I'm the CEO. Everything that happens here ultimately comes back to me. Then use this. Take what happened and make the company stronger. Build systems that make it harder for this to happen again. Protect the people who need protection. Victoria finally turned to look at him. Is that what you're going to do? Build those systems? If you'll let me. That's what the security task force is for, right? Not just catching bad actors, but preventing them in the first place. I need that journalist in Singapore to be safe, Victoria said quietly. I need that doctor in Nigeria to know his research is protected. I need every single person who trusts our security to actually be secure. Then that's what we'll deliver. Victoria nodded slowly, and Daniel could see her shifting gears, from shock and hurt to determination and action. It was the same transformation he'd witnessed during the board meeting, the same core of steel that had built this company from nothing. Okay, she said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to build a complete audit of every system Delgado and Walsh touched. Every compromised algorithm, every backdoor, every potential vulnerability. Then you're going to design new protocols that close those holes. That's a massive undertaking. I know. That's why I'm authorizing you to expand your team immediately. Hire whoever you need, spend whatever it costs. This is the company's top priority until it's done. What about the clients who might already be compromised? We contact them directly. Full disclosure. We explain what happened, what the risks are, and what we're doing to fix it. Then we offer them enhanced security at no additional cost until we're certain they're protected. And it was the right call, even though it would be expensive and painful and potentially damaging to the company's reputation. Some of them will leave, Daniel said. Let them. I'd rather lose clients honestly than keep them through deception. This company was built on trust. If we lose that, we lose everything. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning the response strategy. Chen coordinated with the FBI, who were eager to have Jennifer Walsh's cooperation. Daniel began the painstaking work of identifying every compromised system and assessing the damage. By 7 p.m., his eyes were burning from staring at screens and his head was pounding from the complexity of the task ahead. But he'd created a framework, a roadmap for how to rebuild the company's security infrastructure from the ground up. His phone alarm went off. Emma's pickup time, 30 minutes away. Daniel saved his work and started packing up. Victoria appeared in his doorway. Heading out? School pickup. I set about 15 alarms to make sure I didn't forget. She smiled. Good. Don't stay late tonight, Daniel. This will all still be here tomorrow. Are you leaving? Eventually. I have a few more calls to make. Daniel hesitated. You know you don't have to carry all of this alone, right? That's what a team is for. I know, but old habits die hard. He understood that. The instinct to handle everything yourself, to not burden others with your problems, to maintain control even when you were drowning. It was the same impulse that had nearly broken him after Sarah died. Just remember, Daniel said, even CEOs need backup sometimes. Victoria's expression softened. Thanks, Daniel, for everything today, for finding Walsh, for handling it professionally, for reminding me why we do this work. That's what you're paying me for. Well, I'm paying you to fix security systems. Everything else, the perspective, the integrity, the humanity, that's just who you are. Daniel didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded and headed for the elevator. Emma was waiting when he arrived at the community center, right on time. She brightened when she saw him, and Daniel felt his heart lift. You're here, she said, running to hug him. Told you I wouldn't forget. They drove home through the evening traffic, Emma chattering about her day while Daniel listened and made appropriate noises of interest and surprise. When they got to the apartment, they made dinner together. Spaghetti with the sauce Emma liked, garlic bread from the freezer, a salad that Emma picked at reluctantly. After dinner, homework. After homework, bath time. After bath time, the current chapter in the Sea Creature book, which was getting exciting as the protagonist discovered an underwater city. And through it all, Daniel was present, focused, not thinking about compromised encryption or corporate betrayal or the mountain of work waiting for him tomorrow, just being a father to his daughter. When Emma was finally asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with a beer and his laptop, reviewing the day's events. The evidence against Walsh and Delgado was solid. The FBI would build their case. Justice, eventually, would be served. But the damage was real. People were at risk because of what had been stolen, and fixing that, truly fixing it, would take months of intensive work. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Just finished my last call. Client in Singapore. Told her everything. She's staying with us. Daniel smiled and typed back. That's good news. She said anyone can make security promises, but it takes courage to admit when you've failed and then commit to doing better. She trusts that more than she trusts perfection. Smart woman. They usually are. Get some rest, Daniel. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Daniel set down his phone and closed his laptop. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding. But tonight, he'd kept his promise to Emma. He'd been there when it mattered. And in the quiet of his apartment, with his daughter sleeping safely down the hall, Daniel Brooks allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could do both. Be the father Emma deserved and the protector that people like that journalist in Singapore needed. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more missed alarms and difficult choices and moments when he'd have to decide between competing responsibilities. But he wouldn't face them alone anymore. He had a team now, a purpose, and somewhere in the past few days, he'd found something else too. A connection to someone who understood the weight of responsibility, who valued integrity over convenience, who was fighting her own battles while trying to protect others. Victoria Hale wasn't just his boss. She was becoming something else. A partner, maybe. An ally. Someone he could trust in a world where trust was increasingly rare. Daniel finished his beer and went to check on Emma one last time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, covers kicked off, stuffed dolphin clutched in one arm. He covered her gently and kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," he whispered. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Brooks went to sleep feeling like maybe tomorrow wouldn't be quite so heavy to carry. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Daniel assembled his security task force with the precision of someone building a specialized surgical team. First came Marcus Chen, no relation to Richard, a network security specialist from Seattle who'd made his reputation breaking into supposedly impenetrable systems just to prove they weren't. Then Aisha Patel, a former NSA analyst who'd grown disillusioned with government work and wanted to use her skills protecting people who actually needed it. Rounding out the team were 2 younger recruits fresh from MIT's cybersecurity program, brilliant minds who could code faster than most people could think. Together, they began the massive undertaking of auditing every system Delgado and Walsh had touched. It was painstaking work, requiring them to essentially rebuild the company's security infrastructure from scratch, while maintaining normal operations. 16-hour days became standard. Daniel's office became command central, with whiteboards covering every available wall surface and empty coffee cups accumulating faster than anyone could clear them. But through it all, Daniel kept his promise to Emma. He set boundaries that his team respected because he insisted on them absolutely. No work calls during dinner, no emails after 8 p.m. unless it was a genuine emergency. And every single school pickup, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered, he was there. Victoria noticed. She'd stop by his office late in the evening sometimes, finding it dark and empty while the rest of the team was still working, and she'd smile to herself before heading back to her own endless stack of responsibilities. The FBI investigation moved forward with surprising speed. Jennifer Walsh's cooperation had given them everything they needed to build an airtight case against Marcus Delgado. By the end of the second week, federal prosecutors had filed formal charges, 18 counts of theft of trade secrets, corporate espionage, and wire fraud. Delgado's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was too damning. He was looking at serious prison time. Walsh herself faced lighter charges thanks to her cooperation, but her career at Hale Industries was finished. She'd pled guilty to lesser offenses and would serve probation, but the real punishment was living with what she'd done. Daniel had seen her once in the lobby before her final departure, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. On a Thursday afternoon in late November, Daniel's monitoring systems finally completed their comprehensive audit. He compiled the results into a report and called an emergency meeting with Victoria and the executive team. The conference room was packed when Daniel arrived. Victoria sat at the head of the table, Richard Chen to her right, Patricia Hall to her left. The rest of the executive team filled the remaining seats, all looking concerned about what this emergency meeting might reveal. Daniel connected his laptop to the presentation system and pulled up the first slide. Over the past 3 weeks, my team has conducted a complete audit of our security infrastructure. We've identified every system that Delgado and Walsh compromised, assessed the potential damage, and developed a comprehensive remediation plan. He clicked to the next slide showing a network diagram with highlighted vulnerabilities. The good news is that most of the damage is containable. The encryption algorithms that were stolen are from an older generation of our software. They're still in use by some legacy clients, but our newer systems use completely different protocols. How many clients are at risk? Victoria asked. 47 using the compromised algorithms. We've already contacted all of them and offered immediate upgrades to our latest security protocols at no cost. 32 have accepted so far. The remaining 15 are evaluating their options. Daniel clicked through several more slides showing technical details, but he could see the executive's eyes starting to glaze over. He shifted gears. But here's what really matters. The reason Delgado and Walsh were able to do this much damage is because our security model was based on trust. We assumed that people with high-level access would use it responsibly. We didn't have adequate monitoring or fail-safes or redundancy. Patricia Hall leaned forward. We had security protocols in place, multiple layers of authentication and access controls. You had security theater, Daniel said bluntly. Protocols that looked good on paper but didn't actually prevent a determined insider from causing damage. Walsh was able to create administrative backdoors that went undetected for months. That should never have been possible. The room was silent. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. Victoria spoke into the tension. What's your recommendation? Daniel pulled up his final slide, a comprehensive security architecture that his team had designed. We implement a zero-trust model. No one gets access to anything unless they absolutely need it for their specific role. Every action is logged, monitored, and verified. We use AI-powered anomaly detection to flag suspicious behavior before it becomes a problem. And we create redundant verification systems so that no single person can bypass security alone. That sounds expensive, like someone from finance said. It is, Daniel agreed. Initial implementation will cost approximately $8 million, with ongoing maintenance adding about $2 million annually to our operating budget. The finance executive winced. But the alternative, Daniel continued, is another breach, another Delgado, another situation where we have to call clients and admit their security was compromised. How much would that cost in lost business and damaged reputation? Victoria didn't hesitate. Approved. All of it. When can we start implementation? We already have. The core systems go live next Monday. Full rollout will take 6 months. Over the next hour, Daniel walked the executive team through every detail of the new security architecture. There were questions, concerns, pushback from people who didn't want to change their comfortable routines. But Victoria backed every recommendation Daniel made, and by the end of the meeting, the new protocols were officially company policy. As the room cleared out, Victoria gestured for Daniel to stay behind. "That was impressive," she said when they were alone. "You didn't just present a solution, you made them understand why it mattered. I've been practicing my presentations." "It shows." She moved to the window, her usual spot when she needed to think. "The board meeting is next week. They're going to want a full report on the Delgado situation and our response. I'd like you to present your findings." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Speaking to the executive team was one thing. Presenting to the board of directors was something else entirely. "Are you sure? Patricia is the CIO. This seems like it should be her territory." "Patricia is good at systems. You're good at making people care." The board needs to understand that this wasn't just a technical failure. It was a failure of culture and oversight. You can make them see that. "What if I screw it up?" Victoria turned from the window and looked at him with an expression that was part amusement, part exasperation. "Daniel, you walked into my office at midnight and told me my computer was being hacked. You spent all night rebuilding my security systems. You stood in front of that same board and presented evidence that destroyed a senior executive's career. You've built a security team from scratch and redesigned our entire infrastructure in 3 weeks. You're not going to screw up a presentation." Those felt different, more immediate, less formal. "That's because you weren't thinking about them as performances. You were just doing what needed to be done." She moved closer. "Do the same thing next week. Don't perform for them. Just tell them the truth." Daniel nodded, still nervous but feeling slightly better. "Okay, I'll do it." "Good. Now go home to your daughter. It's almost 6. Daniel checked his watch, 5:45. His alarm would go off in exactly 13 minutes. "How did you know?" Victoria smiled. "Because you're the most punctual person I've ever met when it comes to Emma. I could set my watch by your departures." That weekend, Daniel took Emma to Navy Pier. They rode the Ferris wheel, ate too much cotton candy, and played games at the arcade until Emma won a stuffed penguin she immediately named Professor Waddles. It was cold and windy by the lake, but Emma didn't seem to notice, too busy pointing out boats and asking questions about how the Ferris wheel worked and whether penguins could really waddle as fast as the ones in her favorite movie. On Sunday evening, while Emma worked on a drawing of Professor Waddles meeting her stuffed dolphin, Daniel's phone rang. Victoria. "I hope I'm not interrupting family time." "Just drawing hour. What's up?" "I wanted to give you advance warning. Marcus Delgado's attorney contacted Richard today. They're threatening to sue you personally for defamation and wrongful interference." Daniel felt his blood run cold. "Can they do that?" "They can try. Richard says it's baseless. Everything you presented was factual, and you were acting within your professional duties. But they're hoping to intimidate you into backing down from your testimony." "I'm not backing down. I know you're not, and the company will cover all your legal expenses. We'll assign you one of our attorneys starting tomorrow. But I wanted you to hear it from me first, not from some threatening letter." Daniel looked at Emma, carefully coloring Professor Waddles in shades of purple and blue, completely absorbed in her art. "He's trying to drag me into a legal fight, make it expensive and complicated to stand up to him. That's the strategy. But Daniel, we have documentation of everything. His theft is a matter of record. This is just desperation." "What if he goes after Emma? What if he tries to use her to pressure me? Victoria's voice hardened. If he even looks in your daughter's direction, we'll bury him so deep he'll never see daylight. I promise you that. The fierce protectiveness in her tone surprised Daniel. This wasn't just his boss protecting an employee. This was something more personal. Thank you, he said quietly. We protect our own, Daniel. You're part of this team now. That means something. After they hung up, Daniel sat watching Emma draw until she noticed him staring. What's wrong, Daddy? Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking about work. Is it bad thinking or good thinking? Daniel smiled. Good thinking. I was thinking about how lucky I am to work with people who care about doing the right thing. Like Mommy used to? Yeah, like Mommy used to. Emma went back to her drawing, satisfied with this answer. Daniel pulled out his laptop and began preparing for the board presentation, making notes about what Victoria had said. Don't perform. Just tell the truth. The following week moved faster than Daniel wanted. Monday brought the rollout of the new security systems, which meant 18-hour days troubleshooting issues and training staff on new protocols. Tuesday brought the company attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Kim, who immediately put Daniel at ease by telling him Delgado's lawsuit was nonsense that would be dismissed quickly. Wednesday and Thursday blurred together in a haze of meetings, system checks, and preparation for Friday's board presentation. Emma noticed the stress. On Thursday night, she crawled into bed next to Daniel while he was reviewing his presentation notes. You're worried about tomorrow, she observed. A little bit. Is it scary? Kind of. I have to talk to a lot of important people and explain complicated things. Emma considered this seriously. When I have to do show and tell at school and I'm scared, Mrs. Peterson says to pick one person to talk to, like pretend everyone else isn't there and just talk to your friend. Daniel looked at his daughter, this wise little person who somehow knew exactly what to say. That's really good advice, Em. So tomorrow, just talk to your friend. Who's your friend there? Daniel thought about Victoria, about the strange bond they'd formed over late nights and shared crises. I think I know who, he said. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Daniel dressed carefully, his best suit, the tie Emma had picked out for him last Father's Day, shoes that actually matched. He dropped Emma at school with an extra long hug. Remember, she whispered, just talk to your friend. I will. Love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Daddy. You're going to be great. The board meeting started at 10 a.m. in the largest conference room at Hale Industries. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, set up his laptop, and tried to calm his racing heart. Victoria was already there, reviewing papers, looking every inch the powerful CEO in a navy suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. You'll do fine. Just remember what I told you. The board members began filing in, Eleanor Rothstein looking as formidable as ever, followed by 10 others representing various interests and backgrounds. They took their seats around the massive table. Coffee was poured, and Eleanor called the meeting to order. Victoria gave the opening remarks, summarizing the Delgado situation and introducing Daniel as the security director who'd uncovered the breach and led the response effort. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stood, connected his laptop to the presentation system, and looked around the table. 11 faces, all watching him with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. His heart pounded. His palms were sweaty. Then he found Victoria's eyes. She gave him a slight nod. Just talk to your friend. 3 weeks ago, Daniel began, his voice steadier than he felt. I was a contractor finishing up a routine security audit. I had no intention of getting involved in corporate politics or uncovering a major espionage operation. I just wanted to finish my job and get home to my daughter. He clicked to the first slide, the network anomaly he'd noticed that night. But then I saw this, a tiny delay in network traffic. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. Most security systems didn't flag it. But I've spent my career learning to see the invisible, to notice the small things that signal something wrong. He walked them through the entire story. Finding the intrusion, confronting Victoria, the all-night encryption rebuild, the board meeting where Delgado had exposed himself, the discovery of Jennifer Walsh's involvement, the comprehensive audit and remediation. But he didn't just present facts and figures. He told them about the journalist in Singapore whose safety had been compromised, about the doctor in Nigeria whose research had been put at risk, about the 47 clients whose trust had been violated. Security isn't just about protecting data, Daniel said, looking around the table. It's about protecting people. Every encryption algorithm we develop, every protocol we implement, every system we build, there are real human beings on the other end trusting us to keep them safe. He pulled up the slide showing the new security architecture. What happened with Delgado and Walsh revealed fundamental weaknesses in how we approach security. We trusted when we should have verified. We assumed loyalty when we should have monitored behavior. We built systems that looked secure but had critical vulnerabilities. Eleanor Rothstein leaned forward. And your new protocols address these weaknesses? They eliminate them. The new architecture makes it virtually impossible for a single person to bypass security. Every access is logged and verified. Every anomaly is flagged and investigated. We've moved from a trust-based model to a verification-based model. At significant cost, one of the other board members noted. $8 million for implementation, $2 million annually for maintenance, Daniel confirmed. But consider the alternative. Delgado's theft has already cost us 3 major clients who decided they couldn't trust our security. That's approximately $12 million in lost annual revenue. His actions have exposed us to potential lawsuits from clients whose data was compromised. And the reputational damage is incalculable. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. We can't afford another breach like this. Not financially, not ethically, not if we want to maintain our position as the industry leader in secure encryption. For the next 40 minutes, Daniel fielded questions. Some were technical, which he answered with clear explanations stripped of jargon. Some were financial, which he addressed by showing projected costs versus potential losses. And some were philosophical, questions about balancing security with usability, about maintaining company culture while implementing strict monitoring, about trusting employees while verifying their actions. Daniel answered each one honestly, sometimes admitting when he didn't have a perfect solution, but explaining how they'd approach the problem. When the questions finally stopped, Eleanor sat back in her chair. Mr. Brooks, when you were hired as a contractor a month ago, I doubt anyone expected you'd be standing here presenting to this board. But I have to say your work has been exemplary. You've not only identified and addressed a serious security breach, but you've given us a roadmap for preventing future incidents. She looked around the table. I move that we approve the full implementation of the new security protocols as presented, with Mr. Brooks continuing to lead the effort. All in favor? 11 hands rose without hesitation. Motion carries unanimously. Eleanor extended her hand to Daniel. Thank you for your service to this company, Mr. Brooks. We're fortunate to have you. As the board members filed out, several stopped to shake Daniel's hand or offer congratulations. When the room finally cleared, only Victoria remained. You were brilliant, she said. Daniel felt the adrenaline finally starting to drain, leaving him slightly shaky. I did what you said, just told the truth. You did more than that. You made them care. That's a rare gift. They walked together toward the elevator. It was just past noon, and the building was bustling with the lunch hour rush. I have something for you, Victoria said. She handed him an envelope. Open it later, when you're alone. What is it? Just open it later. The elevator arrived. Victoria stepped in, but Daniel hesitated. Thank you, he said, for believing in me, for giving me this chance, for protecting Emma when Delgado tried to threaten me. Victoria smiled. You showed up when I needed you. At midnight, in my office, when you could have just sent an email. That kind of integrity is worth protecting. The elevator doors started to close. Victoria held them open. Are you coming? Actually, I'm going to take the rest of the day off. I promised Emma I'd pick her up early from school. There's a new exhibit at the aquarium she's been dying to see. Good. Go be with your daughter. The work will be here on Monday. Daniel watched the elevator doors close, then headed for his office to grab his things. The envelope Victoria had given him sat in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out and opened it despite her instruction to wait. Inside was a handwritten note on company letterhead. Daniel, when I started this company 12 years ago, I had a vision of creating security that protected the people who needed it most. Somewhere along the way, I got caught up in market share and quarterly earnings and board presentations. I forgot why we were doing this work. You reminded me. You reminded all of us. The 6-month contract was always a test, a way to see if you were the right fit for this company. You've more than proven yourself. I'm offering you a permanent position as Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to me. Same flexibility, better benefits, equity stake in the company. Think about it. Take your time. But know that you've already changed this company for the better, and I hope you'll stay to see what we can build together. With gratitude and respect, Victoria Daniel read the note 3 times, each time seeing new implications. Chief Security Officer, permanent position, equity stake. It was everything he could have hoped for in terms of career advancement. But more than that, it was validation. Proof that doing the right thing, showing up when it mattered, caring about people over processes, it all meant something. He carefully folded the note and put it back in the envelope. He'd think about it over the weekend, discuss it with Emma in age-appropriate terms, maybe call Linda for advice. But right now, he had a promise to keep. Daniel left the Meridian Tower and drove to Emma's school. He was 45 minutes early for pickup, so he sat in the parking lot and called the aquarium to check the hours for the new exhibit. Then he answered a few emails, returned a call from Rebecca Kim about Delgado's lawsuit being dismissed with prejudice, and finally just sat there enjoying the quiet. At 2:30, the school doors opened and children poured out like water from a burst dam. Emma spotted his car immediately and ran over, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Daddy, you're early." "I promised we'd go to the aquarium, remember? The new jellyfish exhibit?" Emma's face lit up with pure joy. "Really? Right now?" "Right now." They drove to the shed aquarium, Emma talking nonstop about her day. The math test she'd aced, the boy who'd tried to trade his cookies for her fruit snacks, the art project they were starting next week. Daniel listened and laughed and asked questions, fully present in a way he hadn't been able to be during the chaotic weeks of the security audit. The jellyfish exhibit was mesmerizing. Dozens of different species floating in illuminated tanks, their translucent bodies pulsing with ethereal grace. Emma pressed her nose against the glass, watching in wonder as a moon jellyfish drifted past. "They're like aliens," she breathed. "Beautiful aliens from another world." Daniel stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, and felt something settle inside him. This was what mattered. Not board presentations or security protocols or career advancement. This moment, right here, with his daughter discovering the wonder of the natural world. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Hope you and Emma are enjoying the aquarium. See you Monday." No rush on the decision. Daniel typed back, "Having a great time. Thanks for everything." Victoria's response came quickly. "Thank you for reminding me why we do this work. Enjoy your weekend." Daniel put his phone away and focused entirely on Emma. They spent 2 hours at the aquarium, visiting old favorites and discovering new exhibits. Emma asked if they could get dinner at the Italian place she loved, and Daniel agreed immediately. Over pasta and breadsticks, Emma studied him thoughtfully. "You seem different today," she said. "Different how?" "Happier, less worried." Daniel considered this. "I think maybe I am. I've been carrying a lot of stress for a long time, but I'm starting to figure out how to balance everything better." "Because of your new job?" "Partly, but mostly because I'm learning that I don't have to do everything alone. I have people who help me, like your Aunt Linda helps with you when I need it, and my team helps with work. And my boss, Victoria, she understands about needing to be there for you." Emma twirled spaghetti around her fork. "Do you like her, Victoria?" It was an innocent question, but it made Daniel pause. "I respect her. She's smart and fair, and she cares about doing the right thing." "But do you like her?" Daniel thought about the past month, the all-night encryption rebuild, the quiet conversations in her office, the way she'd protected him when Delgado threatened legal action, the note in his pocket offering him a future with the company. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I like her." Emma smiled like she'd uncovered a secret. "Good. Mommy would want you to have friends." The mention of Sarah was unexpected but not unwelcome. Emma talked about her mother less frequently now, but when she did, it was usually with acceptance rather than pain. "Your mom would have liked Victoria," Daniel said. "They were similar in a lot of ways. Both strong, both fighters, both people who stood up for what they believed in. Maybe that's why you like her. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was something else entirely. The recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the cost of integrity. They finished dinner and drove home through the Friday evening traffic. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Daniel carried her up to their apartment, tucked her into bed, still wearing her clothes, and stood in her doorway watching her sleep. 3 years ago, this would have destroyed him. Coming home to an apartment where Sarah's absence was a physical presence, facing another evening alone, wondering how he'd make it through tomorrow and the day after that. But somewhere along the way, he'd learned to carry the grief differently. It was still there, it would always be there, but it no longer defined every moment. He could remember Sarah with love instead of just pain, could honor her memory by living fully instead of just surviving. His phone buzzed. Another text, but this time from an unknown number. Mr. Brooks, this is Eleanor Rothstein. I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for your presentation today. You didn't just show us technical solutions. You reminded us why this company matters. Victoria tells me she's offered you a permanent position. I hope you'll accept. We need more people like you in leadership. Daniel stared at the message. The board chairwoman had personally reached out to encourage him to stay. That wasn't just professional courtesy. That was respect. He typed back, "Thank you, Ms. Rothstein. That means a great deal. I'm giving the offer serious consideration." Her response came immediately. "Take your time, but know that you've already earned your place here." Daniel set down his phone and moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in that glittering grid of lights was the Meridian Tower, and in that tower was an office that might become his permanently. A team that respected him. A boss who valued integrity over convenience, a mission that mattered. And here, in this modest apartment, was his daughter, the person who mattered most, the reason he got up every morning and fought through every challenge. Could he do both? Be the chief security officer that Hale Industries needed and the father that Emma deserved? The old Daniel would have agonized over this decision for weeks, making lists of pros and cons, seeking advice from everyone he knew, paralyzed by the fear of choosing wrong. But the new Daniel, the one who'd learned to trust his instincts, who'd stood up to corporate corruption, who'd rebuilt his life one small choice at a time, that Daniel already knew the answer. He pulled out his phone and composed an email to Victoria. "Victoria, thank you for the offer and for your faith in me. I accept the position of Chief Security Officer with the understanding that my first priority will always be Emma. I look forward to building something meaningful together. See you Monday, Daniel." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came less than a minute later. "Daniel, welcome to the team. Permanently, this time. Emma will always come first. That's not just understood, it's required. Leaders who forget their families make poor decisions everywhere else. Congratulations on making the right choice." V. Daniel smiled at the informal signature, at the understanding implicit in her words. He checked on Emma one more time, still sleeping peacefully, and then settled onto the couch with a book. Not work reading, not security protocols or audit reports. Just a thriller he'd been meaning to read for months, something to help him unwind. Saturday morning brought sunshine and unseasonably warm weather. Emma woke up full of energy, demanding pancakes and announcing that Professor Waddles needed to meet all her other stuffed animals properly. Daniel made breakfast while Emma organized an elaborate meeting of stuffed creatures in the living room. His phone stayed silent. No work emergencies, no urgent emails, just a peaceful Saturday morning with his daughter. Around noon, his phone did ring. "Linda." "I haven't heard from you in over a week," she said without preamble. "Emma texted me about the aquarium yesterday. She said you were early to pick her up and you seemed happy. What's going on?" Daniel told her everything, the board presentation, Victoria's job offer, his decision to accept. "That's wonderful, Daniel. Really. I'm proud of you." "Thanks. It feels right." "And this Victoria person. Emma says you like her." Daniel laughed. "Emma has a big mouth. She's observant, like her mother was. So is there something there?" "No, maybe. Probably not. She's my boss. She's also a person. And from everything you've told me, she sounds like someone Sarah would have approved of." The comment surprised Daniel. "You think so?" I know so. Sarah always said you needed someone who could match you intellectually and challenge you to be better. Someone who valued integrity as much as you do. This Victoria sounds like that kind of person. It's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. Just don't overthink it. They talked for another 20 minutes about Emma's school progress, upcoming holidays, Linda's work, normal family conversation that felt grounding and good. When they hung up, Emma appeared at his elbow. Was that Aunt Linda? Yeah. Did you tell her about Victoria? I mentioned her, yes. Emma grinned. I knew it. You like her. I like you, troublemaker. Now go organize your stuffed animals before they stage a rebellion. Sunday passed quietly. Daniel and Emma went to the park, baked cookies that turned out slightly burnt but still edible, and watched movies until Emma fell asleep on the couch. Daniel carried her to bed and spent the evening preparing for Monday, not with anxiety, but with anticipation. This was his life now. Chief security officer at a company that mattered, father to an amazing daughter, person who'd found his way through grief to something that resembled hope. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, proper November weather returning after the weekend's warmth. Daniel dropped Emma at school with their usual goodbye ritual, hug, high five, reminder to be awesome, and headed to the Meridian Tower. The building looked different somehow, or maybe Daniel was just seeing it differently now that he knew he belonged here permanently. He rode the elevator to the 37th floor, where his team had spent the previous weeks building the new security infrastructure. Marcus Chen greeted him with a fist bump. Boss is in early. We're officially live on all systems as of 6 a.m. No major issues so far. That's because you built it right, Daniel said. How's the monitoring system performing? Like a dream. Already flagged 3 minor anomalies that turned out to be legitimate but unusual access patterns. Systems learning fast. Daniel spent the next hour reviewing reports and checking on his team. Everything was running smoothly, the kind of smooth that only came from careful planning and meticulous execution. Around 9:30, his phone rang. Victoria. Good morning, Chief Security Officer. How does it feel? Still getting used to the title? You'll grow into it. Listen, I wanted to invite you to something. There's a company celebration next Friday evening. Holiday party, sort of. Fancy venue, dinner, dancing. Spouses and significant others are invited, but I know that's complicated for you with Emma. Daniel thought quickly. Linda could watch her for an evening. She's been asking when I'd let her babysit more. Then you'll come? Is that a professional requirement or a personal invitation? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Both, Victoria said finally. Professionally, it's good for the team to see leadership present. Personally, I'd enjoy having someone there who doesn't spend the entire evening talking about quarterly projections. Daniel smiled. Then I'll be there. Good. It's black tie, by the way. Of course it is. Ah, Victoria laughed. Welcome to executive life, Daniel. See you at the staff meeting at 10. The week flew by in a blur of system implementations and team meetings. The new security protocols were performing exactly as designed, catching anomalies and preventing unauthorized access. Client feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The journalist in Singapore sent a personal thank you email after being upgraded to the newest encryption systems. On Wednesday, federal prosecutors announced they'd reached a plea agreement with Jennifer Walsh. She'd served 2 years probation and community service in exchange for her continued cooperation. Marcus Delgado, facing overwhelming evidence and no leverage, had pled guilty to all charges. He'd be sentenced next month, likely to significant prison time. Justice, slowly and imperfectly, was being served. Friday evening arrived faster than Daniel expected. He'd rented a tuxedo, his first time wearing one since his wedding, and felt absurdly formal picking up Emma from school. "Daddy, you look like a penguin," she squealed with delight. "Thanks, sweetheart. That's exactly the look I was going for." Linda arrived at 6 to watch Emma. She took one look at Daniel and whistled. "Well, don't you clean up nice. Victoria's not going to know what hit her." "It's a professional event." "Sure it is. Have fun at your professional event." The venue was a historic hotel in downtown Chicago, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers. Daniel felt out of place immediately, surrounded by executives in designer clothes and jewelry that probably cost more than his car. Then he saw Victoria. She stood near the entrance talking to a small group, wearing a midnight blue gown that was both elegant and understated. Her hair was down for the first time since Daniel had met her, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She looked different, softer somehow, less guarded. She caught his eye and excused herself from her conversation. "You made it," she said, smiling. "Barely. I almost turned around 3 times in the parking lot." "I'm glad you didn't. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." The next hour was a blur of handshakes and small talk. Daniel met board members and major clients and other executives, all while trying not to feel completely overwhelmed. Victoria stayed close, smoothly redirecting conversation whenever it got too technical or too awkward. Dinner was served at 8, some elaborate multi-course affair that Daniel mostly pushed around his plate while making conversation with the people at his table. But he noticed that Victoria, seated at the head table with other senior leadership, kept glancing his direction. After dinner came dancing. A live band played standards from the 40s and 50s, and the dance floor filled with couples. Daniel stayed at his table, content to watch. Then Victoria appeared beside him. "Dance with me," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I. We'll figure it out together." She extended her hand. Daniel took it and let her lead him to the dance floor. They swayed awkwardly at first, neither quite sure where to put their hands or how close to stand. But gradually they found a rhythm, Victoria's hand resting lightly on Daniel's shoulder, his hand at her waist, their other hands clasped between them. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly, "for coming tonight. I know this isn't really your scene." "It's not so bad. The company's decent." She smiled. "I wanted to tell you something. Before Emma, before the aquarium trips, before you made being a parent your first priority, I didn't understand. I thought people who left work early for family commitments weren't serious about their careers. I thought dedication meant sacrifice. And now? Now I think the people who maintain balance are the strongest ones. You're a better chief security officer because you're a good father, not in spite of it." They danced in silence for a moment, and Daniel became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how her perfume smelled like something expensive and subtle, how her hand felt in his. Can I ask you something personal?" Daniel said. "Sure." "Why did you really offer me this job? Not the corporate answer, the real reason." Victoria looked up at him, and in her eyes Daniel saw something he hadn't noticed before. Vulnerability, loneliness, the weight of being in charge all the time with no one to share the burden. "Because you showed up," she said simply. "When you could have walked away, when it would have been easier to stay invisible, you showed up. And then you kept showing up. Every time it mattered, you were there. Do you know how rare that is?" "I was just doing what felt right." "Exactly. You didn't calculate the cost or weigh the benefits. You just did what was right. I've spent 12 years building this company, Daniel, and I've met a lot of brilliant people, a lot of ambitious people, a lot of successful people, but I've met very few who are genuinely good. You're good, and I wanted that goodness on my team." The song ended. Another began. They kept dancing. "I was married once," Victoria said. "Did I tell you that?" "You mentioned it briefly." He wanted a wife who would host dinner parties and join the country club and support his political ambitions. "I wanted to build a company that changed the world. We were fundamentally incompatible, but we spent 3 years trying to make it work before finally admitting defeat. That must have been hard." It was a relief. Honestly. The hard part was after, when I threw myself into work and forgot that there were other things that mattered. People, connections, relationships that weren't transactional. She paused. "You remind me that those things exist, that it's possible to care about people and still be successful." Daniel felt his heart beating faster. Victoria said, "I know this is complicated," she interrupted. "You're my employee. There are power dynamics and professional considerations and probably a dozen HR policies I'm violating just by having this conversation. But I wanted you to know that I value you. Not just as an employee, but as a person, as someone who makes me want to be better." The song ended. They stopped dancing but didn't immediately step apart. "I should get back to my table," Daniel said finally. "People will talk. Let them talk." But they separated anyway, returning to their respective spaces in the room. Daniel could feel eyes on them, curious glances from people who'd noticed them dancing, who were probably already speculating about the relationship between the CEO and the new chief security officer. He stayed another hour, making polite conversation and pretending everything was normal. But his mind kept returning to Victoria's words, the vulnerability she'd shown, the connection neither of them could quite name but both clearly felt. Around 11, people started leaving. Daniel found Victoria near the exit, thanking departing guests. "I'm heading out," he said. "Thank you for coming, and for the dance." "Any time." Their eyes held for a moment longer than was strictly professional. Then Daniel left, walking into the cold November night, his mind churning with thoughts and feelings he wasn't quite ready to examine. The following weeks settled into a new normal. Daniel's team continued implementing and refining the security protocols. The company's reputation recovered as clients saw the aggressive response to the breach. Victoria and Daniel worked together frequently, their professional relationship strong and productive. And underneath it all, unspoken but present, was something else. A connection that neither of them pushed but neither could quite ignore. 3 months passed. Winter gave way to early spring. Emma turned 8 with a birthday party at the aquarium that Daniel helped plan. The security systems Daniel had built became industry-leading, winning awards and attracting attention from major tech publications. And then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in March, Victoria stopped by Daniel's office. "Walk with me?" she asked. They rode the elevator to the roof, a space Daniel hadn't known existed. It was a small garden area with benches and planters, clearly designed as a retreat for executives who needed air. "I wanted to show you this, Victoria said. "It's my thinking spot when I need to clear my head." They sat on a bench overlooking the city. Spring sunshine warmed Daniel's face. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the holiday party," Victoria said. "About things being complicated." "Me too. And I've decided I don't care if it's complicated. Life is complicated. Relationships are complicated. But some things are worth the complication." Daniel turned to look at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent the past 3 months trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just professional respect. But it's not. It's more than that. And I think you feel it too." Daniel's heart was racing. "I do. But, Victoria, we work together. I report to you. There are real ethical considerations here." "I know. Which is why I've already talked to the board about restructuring our reporting relationships. If we pursue this, if we decide there's something worth exploring, you'll report directly to Patricia Hall instead of me. Clear separation between personal and professional." "You went to the board before talking to me?" "I wanted to know if this was even possible before saying anything. I didn't want to put you in an impossible position." Daniel stood and moved to the edge of the roof garden, looking out at Chicago spreading below them. "Emma is my first priority," he said. "Always. That doesn't change. I wouldn't want it to. And I don't know how to do this. Dating, relationships. I haven't been with anyone since Sarah died. I don't even know if I remember how." Victoria joined him at the railing. "Then we'll figure it out together, slowly, no pressure. Just two people who care about each other, trying to see if there's something more." Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. Not the CEO or the boss or the powerful executive, but Victoria. The woman who'd stayed up all night watching him rebuild encryption systems, who'd stood beside him during the board investigation, who'd protected his daughter without being asked, who valued integrity and fought for what was right and understood the cost of doing good work in a complicated world. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's try." Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They stood there on the roof as the city hummed below them, two people who'd found each other in the middle of a crisis and discovered something neither had been looking for. That evening, Daniel picked up Emma from school and took her for ice cream. "I need to tell you something," he said while they ate. Emma looked up from her strawberry cone. "You're going to start dating Victoria." Daniel nearly dropped his coffee cup. "How did you—" "Daddy, I'm not blind. You smile different when you talk about her, and you wore cologne this morning. You never wear cologne." "I'm that obvious?" "Super obvious." Emma took a thoughtful lick of her ice cream. "I think it's good. Mommy would think it's good too." "How do you know what Mommy would think?" "Because she loved you and she wanted you to be happy. And Victoria makes you happy, so Mommy would like her." Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, amazed once again by her wisdom and her generosity. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" "I know," Emma said confidently. "Can I meet her, Victoria?" "If you want to." "I do, but Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Make sure she knows I come first." "Always, sweetheart, always." 2 weeks later, Daniel orchestrated the meeting. Casual, low pressure, lunch at the aquarium cafeteria, followed by visiting Emma's favorite exhibits. Victoria was nervous, which Daniel found oddly endearing. This powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals was anxious about impressing an 8-year-old. Emma, for her part, was direct. "Do you like dolphins?" she asked Victoria 5 minutes into lunch. "I've never really thought about it," Victoria admitted. "That's okay. Not everyone has a favorite sea creature. But if you're going to date my dad, you should probably learn about ocean animals. It's kind of our thing," Victoria smiled. "Then I'll start learning." They spent the afternoon touring the aquarium, Emma leading the way and providing detailed commentary on every creature they encountered. Victoria listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and didn't try too hard to be liked. By the end of the day, when they were saying goodbye in the parking lot, Emma hugged Victoria without prompting. "You can date my dad," she declared, "but you have to come back to the aquarium with us. There's a lot more I need to teach you." Victoria looked at Daniel over Emma's head, her eyes bright with emotion. "It's a deal," she said. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Daniel and Victoria dated carefully, mindful of the complicated dynamics of their situation. They had dinner once a week, saw movies on occasional weekends when Linda could watch Emma, took walks through the city talking about everything and nothing. At work, they maintained professional boundaries. Daniel reported to Patricia Hall as promised, and any overlap with Victoria was handled through proper channels. But in quiet moments, passing in the hallway, catching eyes across a conference room, sharing coffee before early morning meetings, there was an understanding between them. They'd both been through their own versions of loss and loneliness. Both had learned that strength came not from being invulnerable, but from choosing to be vulnerable with the right people. Both had discovered that sometimes the most unexpected connections became the most meaningful. 6 months after that first dance at the holiday party, on a warm September evening, Daniel and Victoria sat on his apartment's small balcony while Emma slept inside. They'd had dinner together. Victoria had learned to cook pasta the way Emma liked it, and were now watching the sunset paint the Chicago sky in shades of orange and gold. "I was thinking," Victoria said, "about taking some time off. Actually, time off, not just working from a different location." "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Maybe somewhere with an aquarium. I have a lot to learn about ocean creatures, apparently." Daniel smiled. Emma would approve of that plan. Victoria took his hand. "What about you? Would you approve?" Daniel thought about the journey that had brought him here. The late-night crisis that had started everything. The choices he'd made to show up when it mattered. The slow rebuilding of a life that had felt broken beyond repair. And here he was, on a balcony, with someone who understood him, in an apartment where his daughter slept safely, living a life that honored both his past and his future. "Yeah," he said. "I approve." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the city lights began to sparkle to life. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Two people who'd learned that sometimes the most profound connections began with the simple choice to stay late and solve a problem together. And somewhere in the distance, the servers in the Meridian Tower hummed with their cold, mechanical rhythm. But now they carried something more than data and corporate secrets. They carried the security protocols Daniel had built, protecting journalists and doctors and activists and ordinary people who needed to keep their information safe. They carried the promise that someone was watching, someone who cared, someone who'd shown up when it mattered, and would keep showing up day after day, because that's what good people did. The story that had started with a tiny network anomaly on a quiet Tuesday night had become something neither Daniel nor Victoria could have predicted. Not just a security upgrade or a corporate success story, but a reminder that the smallest choices could change everything. Daniel had chosen to walk to that corner office instead of sending an email. He'd chosen to stay all night rebuilding encryption systems. He'd chosen to come back when called, even when it meant disappointing his daughter. He'd chosen to tell the truth when lying would have been easier. And Victoria had chosen to trust him, to value integrity over convenience, to offer him not just a job, but a place where his gifts mattered. Together, they'd chosen to see if two complicated people could build something meaningful in the spaces between their responsibilities. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be challenges ahead, balancing work and family, navigating the complexities of their relationship, managing the inevitable crises that came with protecting security in an increasingly dangerous digital world. But as Daniel sat on that balcony with Victoria's hand in his, listening to the quiet sounds of his daughter sleeping inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, solid hope for a future that honored his past while embracing new possibilities. The server room might still hum with its cold mechanical rhythm, but up here, in the warm autumn air, surrounded by the people he cared about, Daniel Brooks had finally found what he'd been searching for since the night Sarah died. A reason to keep going, a purpose that mattered, and the understanding that sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply show up when someone needed you. Everything else would follow from there.